The Collector's Compass is presented by All Touch Case, a premium display and protection solution designed to showcase your cards while keeping them safe. At Collectors MD, we encourage our community to collect with intention. That means displaying your cards how you want to, not how the hobby tells you have to. That's where All Touch stands out. Their magnetic hard cases use specially engineered magnets that protect your cards while allowing you to stack and link them for clean organization and unique displays. It gives you real control over how your collection looks and feels. The cases are built with a durable polycarbonate shell and a soft internal cavity, so your cards stay protected without sacrificing presentation. Whether you're working with paper, chrome, autos, or thicker patch cards, they offer sizes that fit your collection. At the end of the day, it's about protecting what you've built and displaying it in a way that feels like yours. Use code CollectorsMD for 15% off your order. And big thanks to All Touch for supporting the show. Collect, protect, it's a peace of mind. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Collector's Compass, the official podcast of Collectors MD, where we explore the intersection of collecting, mental wellness, intentional engagement, and the evolving culture surrounding the modern hobby. I'm your host, Alyx and Ryan, founder of Collectors MD, and today's episode gets directly to the heart of why this community exists. A lot of the guests we have on the show are industry leaders, business owners, clinicians, advocates, creators, and people working to shape the future of collecting. Today's conversation is different because it's coming directly from someone who is living through recovery right now. Joining me today is Ryan Jones, a member of the Collectors MD community who has been navigating his own relationship with gambling, compulsive behaviors, and recovery. Ryan has spent time in residential treatment at Bridgeway Recovery Services in Salem, Oregon, where he's had the opportunity to step outside of his normal environment and take a much deeper look at addiction, the behaviors surrounding it, and what recovery is actually going to require from him moving forward. Ryan and I have gotten to know each other through Collectors MD meetings and conversations outside of them. One of the things I've appreciated about Ryan from the beginning is his willingness to be honest about where he is. He isn't coming on today to tell everyone that he has recovery figured out. He's still learning. He's still doing the work. He's still discovering things about himself, and he's still thinking about what life and recovery are going to look like when he eventually transitions out of this level of care. I actually think that's what makes this conversation so valuable. We hear a lot of recovery stories from people looking back after 5, 10, or 20 years. Those stories are incredibly important, but there's also something powerful about hearing from somebody while they're still actively rebuilding. Ryan reached out to me pretty early after finding Collectors MD. He told me that after attending only a couple of meetings, he couldn't believe how much he related to what people were sharing and that he wished he had found the community sooner. That stuck with me because it speaks to something we've been trying to address since we started Collectors MD. There are people struggling with behaviors around collecting, spending, chasing, gambling, and other gambling adjacent environments who may not immediately recognize themselves in traditional conversations about gambling addiction. Today, we're going to talk about Ryan before recovery and how these behaviors developed and escalated. We'll talk about what losing control actually looked like, what ultimately led him to seek a higher level of care, what residential treatment has taught him about addiction and himself, and how community and lived experience can become part of building a life in recovery. Before we get into all of that, though, I want to make something clear. This is Ryan's story to tell. We're only going to discuss the experiences he's comfortable sharing publicly. Ryan, if there's anything you don't want to get into today, we'll simply move on. Ryan, again, I'm really glad we finally get to have this conversation live. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, amen. I remember when you first asked if I was ready to do a podcast, and I was like, absolutely, let's do this. And then it was like months out, and I was kind of like, dang, I'm a little let down. I was like, let's do this in a couple of weeks. So it's been nice to actually be moved up. Been looking forward to this, and it really gets easier each and every time to share my recovery journey and really open up so that others can hopefully hear the story and hear something that maybe sticks with them that and inspires them to seek out help, or, use some of the resources that are out there with phone numbers and, online and all that. So yeah, I'm glad we're able to connect and excited to get this drilled down and dialed in.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, to your point, we've been talking now for, I think, over a year, and you're so well spoken, and you present yourself really, really well. You're empathetic, you care about other people, and you show that through the meetings that we host on Wednesdays. And I've been wanting to get you on the podcast now for some time, so I'm glad that it's finally come to fruition. And so we're going to dive into our first segment, which is before recovery, when the hobby still felt like the hobby.
Yeah.
Before we get into treatment or any of the difficult stuff, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? Who is Ryan Jones outside of addiction and recovery?
Yeah, that's let's try to give you the elevator pitch here. So nearing 40, I just turned 38. And I've been through a lot in life. I feel like I kind of had to grow up fast. Somebody who was raised by women, no real father figure growing up, and that was hard at times. But I had a lot of great people around me, so that it didn't really impact me as much as it maybe would have some other kids growing up and in later in life. My mother went through some traumatic experiences in her life, and I've learned a lot throughout this and try to go in order. But she's somebody who went through her own addictions, and those addictions really pushed us apart. And still to this day, trying to figure out what kind of relationship I want to have with her, if any. And that is a really, really tough thing to say and recognize, because I can only imagine as a parent, like hearing your child say that or have those thoughts has got to be rough. My grandma, who is more like a mom to me these days, can only imagine what that does to her internally, hearing me say that as her grandson. And then thinking like roles reversed, if I'm in the parental role and I hear my son say that, or my daughter say that, like that would tear me up. So it's challenging in a lot of ways. Obviously I have to do what's best for me, and that's a big part of recovery. But it's blood, right?
Yeah, man.
My mom there. So
Yeah.
that went on. I don't know exactly when her addiction started, but she was absent a lot in the evenings, really from like second or third grade all through middle school and even high school. Obviously later years didn't matter as much, but she would go out with her friend, and thankfully I was friends with her friend's son. And so we'd get together, we'd stay up late, we'd play video games. We thought it was cool. A lot of times they'd come back, and it was 2:00, 3:00 in the morning, they closed the bars, and that meant for us that we got to stay home from school. So we thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
um, I love to learn. The structured environment of the classroom or college is not something that I've been able to do. Tried to do college twice, maybe even 3 times, but started working full time in early age, 17, got a full-time job at Circuit City back in the day, for those who still know what that is. For those that don't, it's a competitor of Best Buy, or Best Buy was trying to be Circuit City, but it looks like they edged them out. And got into management, and just really kind of excelled in any career that I've gone into. So, I mean, that's a little bit about me. I've work history, sales, operational background, kind of jack of all trades kind of thing. So, yeah, kind of pause there, let you know what you need from me.
Awesome, man. Well, I think all of that is really important context, right? Because when we talk about addiction, especially publicly, it's very easy for the addiction to become the person's entire identity, right?
Yeah.
And there's obviously an entire person, an entire life surrounding that experience. So thank you for illustrating, some of your experiences, some of your background.
Yeah.
Why don't you take me back to your relationship with collecting? What did
Yep.
it mean to you originally before any of this became problematic?
Yeah. So I remember it was like February of 23. I actually just went on to one of these sites. Am I able to say the site name? Go ahead.
Yeah, of course.
So, I found Whatnot, right? I found that in February of 23, I believe. I recently got on to kind of just look back and reflect at how much money I had spent and wasted throughout that almost 3.5 year time period. But so it's about February of 23 that I found Whatnot. I had been seeing ads, on Facebook, like many of us do when we get in that algorithm. And, I was like, dude, I need a new hobby. And I used to love collecting as a kid, downloaded it, and would I learn a lot of lessons, and still learning some lessons. But, I downloaded that. And the first thing was kind of the meme. I was like, holy cow, these autographed jerseys for how much? Like, this is a steal. Well, really, it's just, I'm so out of loop now. I didn't know that there's, different jerseys that hold more value and so forth. So I definitely overpaid with like a lot of purchases on Whatnot.
Right.
And I had found that at a time where I was depressed, and I really didn't know how severe the depression was and was going to get. But when I found it, it gave me the euphoric feeling of going to the card shop with, I call him my dad. He was technically my step grandpa, about the closest thing I had to a dad. And, that euphoric feeling of going in and buying a pack or buying singles. And I was like, God, I miss this. Like, why did I get away from it? And then it was fueling competition, swipe, swipe. Like, I'm not going to not let you outbid me. Right. And it kind of fueled that competition. I was at a spot where I was traveling about 3 hours north to Vancouver, Washington for work, and every Monday, and then driving back every Thursday. And was living up there remote. So it's like, I didn't know a ton of people in Vancouver. So being able to hop on to Whatnot, watch these streams, kind of just get all the nostalgic feelings, and then, participate. And as we all know, some of those breakers and streamers are, dude, they've got the right energy. They remember you. Obviously, sometimes it's for good. Sometimes it's just to keep you engaged. And then you got the people in the chat that you would never come across, and then you become friends with. And it's like, just can't tell you how many times it's like, it felt good to get a little tag. Hey, at Mosaics, what's up? How you been, man? It's just like, I don't even know you, but like, it just felt good, especially when I needed that attention. So
right.
That's kind of how I found it. But then also, it later on found out that gambling would soon be how I really, really cope with my depression and isolation. And it was an easy way to gamble because it was there on the phone.
Sure.
So that's how I found it. And then obviously it progressed from there, but that's how I found it.
Gotcha. So did you collect it all as a kid?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I pretty much only collected Jordan and Jerry Rice, occasional Steve Young, Joe Montana, but it was pretty much Jordan, Jerry Rice. I mean, the Blazers a little bit, just because they're the hometown team in Oregon. The Bulls, of course, because of Jordan, and then San Francisco 49ers. So that was it. I still got my binders of those. That's like the only thing that I've really held on to since kind of departing with all of the collection is the childhood stuff.
Yeah.
It holds more memories, good memories, than the recent stuff does.
Yeah, man. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? Like for most collectors, most of us, this doesn't begin with chasing or consequences. It begins with something enjoyable and nostalgic and social and meaningful, right? So what was the hobby giving you emotionally in those earlier stages? Like what made it something you wanted to keep coming back to when you were collecting, Joe Montana and Steve Young?
Yeah. Well, and then it was, obviously young childhood. So it was just the excitement and the thrill of, or what we call the chase. Am I going to get my favorite player? So it was cool. God, I mean, the amount of knowledge that I knew about NBA and NFL players that were just absolutely, why would you know what round they were drafted and what college they went to,
Yeah.
But it became like just a way for me to gather information about them. And then more so, with your friends, you'd take your trading books over, you'd start trading with them, and okay, I've got some Raiders. I don't care about Ken Stabler. I don't care about Marcus Allen or Tim Brown. So I was like, what kind of Niners you got? So as a kid, it was just really, as we know, it was fun. It was trading because we wanted something and didn't care about the value. And sure, got to the point where the parents got involved. Like, hey, here's a magazine. Here's Beckett. Make sure that you're looking these cards up and you're getting your money's worth. So then it was a lesson too of like, hey, what does the value of the cards actually equate to? And how do you make sure that you're not giving somebody $100 card as a kid for a $5 card, right? So, but the companionship, the friendship, and just being able to have quality time with a friend was awesome.
Yeah. So you obviously talked about your experience of rediscovering the hobby through Whatnot, and at some point, that relationship that you once had as a kid started fundamentally changing. Can you like pinpoint the time or the moment when it started becoming less about what you were actually collecting and more about the anticipation or feeling associated with participating?
Yeah, I would say when I came to the point where I was spending more money than I had, I was like, okay, this last 3 days, I just spent more money than I do in getting 2 weeks in take home pay.
Right.
It sadly wasn't very long in. I'd say 4 to 6 months in. The moment I started realizing can't hold these anymore, these things that I really want. If I want to keep going down this high of the chase and the thrill of getting that next big hit, I got to move these. I remember I actually went through Facebook and, through groups and mutual acquaintances, and ended up actually finding somebody here in my hometown who was like, hey, I've got a buddy who had a card shop. He'll probably buy all your stuff. And he bought a good chunk of it. Well, then that gave me another probably 6 months of funding. I say that, and it probably actually was more like 2 months or less, but gave me some more funding. So then I went back in, and you make more, you spend more.
Yep. Exactly.
It got to the point where it was like, okay, now I'm having somebody fly out from, I think they were in Chicago at the time or somewhere in Illinois. Now they're in Florida, but fly out, and he took all of my cards, less the base, and like, anything was probably under $2, but all of it. And I was like, man, okay, this is a solid chunk of change here. I can pay off credit cards a little bit, and I can keep at this. I can control it. I can do better. I can collect. I can spend with intent. And as we probably all thought, like, it got to the point where I was like, I'm repacks only. I am not going to go into wax. I'm going to go repacks only. I am going to wait for the right price. I'm going to wait for the right odds to jump up because the chaser teams are left. There's 10 cards in the break, and then got to the point where I was thankful that some of these places were doing buybacks, right? Because it helped me get that money back that I just lost. But you never got ahead, right? Never got ahead.
Yeah.
And, it got to the point where it's like, whew, now they're paying me 85, 90% of comps. Like, why would I go anywhere else? They keep the cards. I got the money wired to me in 24 or 48 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a feeling many of us, have a hard time with, right? Feeling like we can still be in control. We're still in the driver's seat. We're adults. We can make adult decisions, right?
Yep.
And everything you're talking about here. I mean, the distinction we talk about a lot at Collectors MD is like, there can be a significant difference between wanting an item and becoming attached to the feeling associated with potentially getting something, right? Yeah. Once the anticipation becomes more important than the object itself, the experience can start to slowly change. Where did gambling fit into your story? Did those behaviors exist separately at first, or did you eventually start recognizing ways they were feeding into similar patterns?
I think the first home equity loan that I took out really raised some flags for me, to be able to, unfortunately, have the ability to run stuff up on credit was just terrible. And when you've got credit cards with large amounts, you can't keep track of those spends. It's just so easy. You don't even realize you're spending the freaking money, nor do you even care because that dopamine is just lighting you up.
Yeah.
So I'd say, really that first point was like, okay, I've got a problem. If I have to take out a home equity loan to pay off my debts, this is an issue.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Alyx, that's probably right around the time that I found Collectors MD, or maybe just before.
Right.
Unfortunately, it came to, okay, right, as I said earlier, I've sold all these cards. I'm going to be better about this. Home equity loan comes in, pay everything off. Okay, we're back. We got the control. I can do this. Nope. Another home equity loan, pay the credit cards off. Guess what? Rack the cards back up again. Get a personal loan from my grandma, bless her heart, pay off the credit cards. And at that point, I had told her, like, hey, here's the things I'm going through. So I was being a little more accountable and opening myself up. But as we know, with some 12-step programs that are out there, bailing gamblers out is not a good idea. So, but of course she wants me to be right. So I told her, I said, hey, here's what I'm going through. And she didn't understand. She maybe a little bit did, but she didn't quite fully understand. How is it, like, how are you able to spend this much money? Nor did I think she fully know. And God, I remember, I moved over to Central Oregon for about 3 years, and her and I actually went in on an investment property because I've got one tied up here in Springfield that I'm kind of carrying the note on. But anyways, at 34, 35, I was like, man, I don't want to be living with my grandma. And then my mom was down at the house. And I'm like, I can't be paying half of a mortgage and living with my grandma and my mom at this age, right? So that obviously added to some of the depression that I was going through. Um, but I kind of lost track where I was going, so I'm going to loop back to you, Alex, and have you bring me back.
Yeah, no, this is all really, really great context, and appreciate you opening up and being vulnerable here. I know it's certainly not easy, right? When you look back now with everything you've learned in treatment, right? What similarities do you recognize between the different behaviors between the collecting versus the gambling?
It's all for dopamine. It is all for dopamine. I was somebody who could go to the casino and yeah, I might be there longer than I had planned on as do most gamblers, but casinos were never a problem. Here in Oregon, we unfortunately have video lottery in every bar, and there's delis that aren't really delis that are just serving up Costco food, reheated out of a nice microwave.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it got to the point where collecting and whatnot definitely turned those into another form of coping and outlet for me. As I mentioned earlier, I was driving to Vancouver pretty much there and back every week. And there was a casino 20 minutes away that I'd be hitting while I was up there. And then on my drive back on Thursday evenings, I'd stop at the casino along the way. So it's like, I could never escape it, And then of course, with it being on your phone, DraftKings, like done it all, So it's the dopamine. I remember, God, I don't know, maybe it was 6 months or so ago, thinking, man, Mondays, I am just hungover every day. Like, it doesn't matter if I stop drinking on Saturday and I'm hydrating all day Sunday. I still felt like I was hungover on Monday. And really I was, but I was like, how is this possible? I'm like, I know I'm getting old, but I'm not that old. Right, Alex? Well, then I was at treatment and it clicked. I was like, holy shit. It's not the alcohol that I'm coming down from. It's gambling all night Friday night, all day Saturday, and all day Sunday. When you're in the heat of, having football and basketball together, I would go after work and I'd go play video lottery. I'd be making bets on DraftKings while I was there. And then I'd be like, oh, shoot, I got to get back so I can get into the live bets and hedge or make some middle bets if needed. And it got bad. And all day Saturday making parlays and using the boosts because it's like, oh, plus 300, I can hit those. And then getting the plus 30% or even got to the point where it's plus 50%. And all of a sudden it goes from, a 10 to a 50 to 100 to $500 max bet on these boosts. And it's just like, okay, I can really do this. You know what? If I, again, hold myself accountable, I can do this. So shoot, I got in the spot, Alex, where I had created a bot and I would take my bet and I would input it and it would alert me live, and I'd pull in APIs or whatever as webhooks from ESPN and then NBA.com or NFL.com as a backup in case ESPN went down, and it would say, hey, somebody's at 25% of their leg, right? You need them hit. So then it would alert me. I'd go in and grab the over under of the individual stat that I needed and send it to my bot and literally have it spit out a hedge bet. Say, hey, you need to wager this amount because I told it I want to make sure I'm winning. I don't care if it's only $100 or $1,000. That'd be great, but like I don't want to lose. So say, hey, here's what you need to bet. And I just trusted it too fast, bet too big, and maybe with time it could have been dialed in. But I mean, I think like they're gonna win no matter what. So
yeah, man. And Jared, shout out to you, man. Appreciate you as always for hopping in, sharing some really great points in the chat. He says, great point. It's harder to clock the physical withdrawal for abstract things like gambling, but it's real. He also said, you dissing my Costco hot dog. Yeah, man. I mean, this is where this conversation becomes really nuanced, right? When we're obviously not saying collecting in its purest form and gambling are automatically the same thing. They're not. And millions of people participate in collecting without experiencing harm. But for somebody vulnerable to certain patterns, different environments can sometimes produce similar experiences around things like anticipation, uncertainty, chasing, instant gratification, access, loss of control, right? The environment can change while some of the underlying patterns remain familiar. So when you look back at how you were participating in these various activities, what behaviors were you starting to show up that you recognize, very differently today?
Yeah, irritability was a big one. Little things that just were like, why is that why am I letting that bother me?
Right.
Restless leg syndrome. I used to never fidget. My
Oh
leg
man.
never used to just freaking go up and down. There was a laundry list, and that was actually probably one of my favorite exercises that I did at the Sandy Annam House in Salem. Um, is all of these signals these as an exercise, and it was like I have 17 or 18 of these that like I never really did these. Now it all makes sense. Like this is my body trying to tell me that I needed that dopamine hit, or I was so depressed that I needed to go and chase whatever it be, whether it be cards, whether it be, bet on uh, DraftKings. Sorry. Um, it was an indicator, right? Something was wrong. And now that I'm out, it's just like I can recognize those sooner. I really haven't had too much withdrawals, not necessarily withdrawals, but triggers that have caused me to want to think about gambling. And thankfully, there's just so many better ways to cope, and things that I've realized from that program that have allowed me to say, okay, I've got loved ones I can call. I've got we'll soon be sponsored when I dial one of those in. You can go to a GA meeting. There's not one in person. There's tons of them online that I can hop into. I can walk my dog. I mean, shit, she freaking suffered more than she should have through this, which is, funny to say because it's a dog, but like, really, she's like a kid to me, get my fat ass, my dad bought into a gym. Excuse my language, but there's so many better things that we can do. And man, Alex, I think I told you before, but the only regret that I have at this point is just not making that call sooner. I remember calling that number. I finally raised a flag and accepted defeat. It's like I cannot do this anymore. I would love to say I'm strong enough to do this on my own, but I can't. Like I need help. And the next day, I actually didn't want to lose momentum. I took a personal day from work, and I called that number back. I called the recovery centers that they said. I said, hey guys, look, I'm at a spot where outpatient's not going to work for me. I just know it's not. I've had terrible thoughts, thankfully, never acted on any of these thoughts, but had some terrible thoughts. And I just know right now with my spending, if I don't get an inpatient, it's going to be bad. I'm going to do more damage than I've done, which is crazy to think. And that damage probably would have been bankruptcy at this point.
Yeah.
So I made some calls, and 2 or 3 weeks later, I got blessed with the opportunity to go into inpatient. And that's the only regret that I have is not making that call sooner, because it has been so phenomenal. It's been so humbling. The gratitude that I've been able to come away with from that experience is just remarkable. I mean, being in a house with people who have, other addictions, and I won't get into too much of that, but the house is there specifically for gambling, but you have people who have other addictions and other problems, like people who don't have a place to go when there's no roof over their head. I mean, that really freaking humbles you. Like,
Yep.
yeah, I may be freaking, I won't say how much money in debt. I mean, I'm happy to, I don't mind disclosing that, but I don't want to trigger anybody else. But, let's just say I've got a full house worth of debt, not from a house. And houses here in Oregon aren't cheap compared to some of the houses down in the South or some of the places. But
Yeah, I hear you.
so yeah, I mean, that it just was like, holy cow, there's so much to be grateful for coming out of there. And I remember one specific meeting to a T. I challenge myself to share at pretty much every meeting. So we actually got to go to a GA meeting every night of the week. And the only reason we wouldn't is if for some reason we didn't have transportation to get there, or somebody was, sick. I remember being in a meeting, and I challenged myself to share at all these meetings and like share from the heart, like get in there and use this time as therapy for myself or whatever it may be. Maybe it makes it easier for that next person to share or to relate to. And I shared something, and I don't remember what it was at that point in time, but I do remember being like, am I even making any sense? Like, it sounds good coming out, but like, are people just sitting there waiting for me to shut up? And gets around to a gentleman who is very involved and maybe even kind of the head of that GA. I won't mention names, but he goes, man, and I just love listening to Ryan talk. I learned so much from him. And in that moment, God, whether it be a quantum change or whatever it was, I felt this so much euphoria that came about me. I got my
Dude, I know
smile back.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I got my smile back, Alex, and some people, some of my friends, heard me say, I for a long time thought I had resting bitch face. It was permanent. It was easier for me to frown than smile,
Yeah.
but I got that smile back, and it stuck, and it's been here with me ever since. And fuck, does it feel good?
Yeah, man.
You
You just brought up so many things that, resonate with me. I mean, I got to address the last thing you said, going to GA meetings in Jersey City for a number of years when I lived there. Um, there's something about giving therapy, right? When you open share in those rooms, that is just so therapeutic. It's cathartic. It's lifting a weight off your shoulders in a lot of ways. And somebody once said something very similar to me. It was the guy that chaired the room. I had a ton of respect for him, still do to this day. Dave C, I believe. Dave, if you're watching this one day, I appreciate you, man. I would share, and he said to me something along the lines of like, Alex, you're a really good storyteller. Like every time you come in here, I look forward to your shares. There was a backhanded nature to what he was saying, but in a constructive way, right? Because at the time I was deep in the throes of my addiction, and I was coming into the room every single day with a new date, right? And a new story. And it was always like a roller coaster of emotions, and it would just spill out. And I was good at articulating my words, and I sounded, like I was on my way to figuring it out, but it was just like, it was just all, bullshit at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was just spewing. And while, yes, I'm a good speaker and presenter and can articulate my words well and, string my thoughts together in a compelling way that tells a story, at the end of the day, I was still gambling. Right.
Yep.
And he basically told me, he was like, it seems like you like telling stories. You like creating this narrative, so to speak. And to me, that really registered, that really just hit home. And I was like, damn, like he's right. A lot of what I'm talking about here is justifying the behavior and isn't necessarily as authentic, as genuine as I might think it is. Right. So there's a lot of subconscious things that go on, especially when you're deep in addiction. You also mentioned, you ask yourself, like, am I just spewing words at this point? Do people even understand what I'm saying? And at the end of the day, that's completely fine, because again, therapy, a share in that type of setting is intended to be exactly what it is, therapeutic. It's supposed to make you feel liberated. And so even if people don't necessarily understand what you have to say, just getting it out there, word vomit, right? Like that's okay. That's completely okay. I think a lot of people are apprehensive to talk in these types of environments because they feel like maybe they're not that well spoken. They aren't comfortable with public speaking. They'll be judged. There's, stigma involved. Like, you got to put all that to the side and just share. Whatever comes out, comes out. But I promise you, you'll feel better. If you stumble on your words, if you forget what you were going to say next, if you just stop, abruptly and it's awkward, and then people are like, don't worry about any of that. Just talk. I promise you'll start to feel better. One other thing I want to address here is step one of not just our 12-step program, but the GA 12-step program, AA, NA. It's all about admitting that whatever vice it is had taken control in our lives, in ways that we couldn't ignore. We basically had to submit to a higher power, whatever that is, right? It could be God. It could be, somebody within your inner circle, one of your loved ones. It could be the community that you meet every week in your GA meeting, whatever it is. You can no longer do it alone. That step is monumental because it's the biggest step. It's the hardest step to take. Looking in the mirror and admitting that we have a problem and that we can no longer control our actions in ways that we thought we could, right? There's so many different ways you can say it, but it's so important for people to realize how hard it is to get, into one of those rooms. And doing that takes so much humility. It takes so much courage. And I always remind people of that. The second hardest part which is not necessarily outlined in the guide or in the 12 steps, is showing up to that second meeting. I can't tell you how many people I've seen come into GA rooms, our peer support meetings at Collectors MD, group meetings that I've led at a professional clinical treatment center, right? They show up once and they never come back, right? They get a taste for it. They're like, I don't need this. This isn't for me. For whatever reason, they don't come back. Showing up again the second time is huge. It's monumental.
Yeah.
And, I can't stress that enough.
Yeah. I literally am planning my life around my recovery. And, whether I subconsciously did that because it's mentioned in the handbook of GA, or it just is what I've realized I need. Maybe it's both, but I literally am telling, whether it's friends or it's family, I'm like, hey guys, sorry, I can't. I remember I had my aunt and one of my cousins in town visiting. We went to dinner, had a great night. And then Saturday they were like, hey, we're going to go out to this car show. We'd love to have you come out. I'm like, what time is it? It's at 9. I was like, guys, I'm sorry. I've got GA at 9:30. Like, I am going 3 times a week. If there was more in town, I probably would go. I actually was supposed to drive back up to Salem yesterday, and I got caught up with some friends taking care of their dog. But I love going to GA. It just continues to be something that, man, I know I'm in the right place with like-minded individuals and people who are struggling with what I'm struggling with, whether it be not as bad or far worse. And when it is far worse, it sucks to hear. But again, talking about gratitude, man, does it make me realize I have a whole lot more than I realize. And yeah, it's going to take me 5 or 6 years to freaking grind my ass off and pay off the debt, but it doesn't matter. I remember a speaker meeting, and one of the guys was talking about the speaker at the speaker meeting, I should say. He's talking about, his wife and how much, she was there for him in this battle of addiction and recovery. And he's like, I don't know how you guys do it alone. And for me, it's just like, part of the reason why I raised the flag, is because I don't want to take this into a relationship. Whenever I find her, wherever she's at, like, I don't want to put this on her. Like, that's unfair pressure. And I don't think it's right. And God forbid I relapse, and, but if she is there for me, that's phenomenal. That's one thing that I don't want to do, is take this into my next relationship.
Yeah.
And have a clear head.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you really seem to have come a long way. We all know recovery is a lifelong commitment, and that, people like myself, people like you, where we've made a lot of progress, that's for sure. But in the grand scheme of things, we're in like we're in infancy stages.
Oh God,
right?
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
We're so early on, and all it takes is one slip up, one trigger, one urge to completely erase the progress we've made. And, we don't say that to sound daunting or to make it sound intimidating or anything like that. You just have to have that one day at a time mentality. And
one day at a time. Yeah, because what you're describing, Alex, is the caught off guard and then the right set of circumstances. Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So when you were collecting, were you setting boundaries for yourself during that period? Like,
boundary, what is that?
Any limits, periods where you were going to step away? Any rules whatsoever that you at least tried to follow?
I just told myself I wouldn't go off the deep end. I never got to the point where I could control the time. I never got to the point where I could say, okay, I'm only going to do $500.
Yeah.
Or 3 hours in one stream is far too much. No, unfortunately, I never got to the point where I was able to set boundaries and stick to them. The only thing that I would be able to do here and there is delete the app. Maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, but then inevitably I download it again.
You download it again.
And it's kind of funny. I came to the realization, I was like, Kanban sounds awesome, right? But I don't want to pay for that. Wait, I don't want to pay for that? What? Like, I mean, what is the annual fee? Like, it's nominal compared to what I was spending and losing, right? So it's so laughable. And I remember being at a GA meeting, and one of the guys there had mentioned Kanban to another person who was their first time, and I think he might have scared her off a little bit, but she's like, no, I can't pay for that. And it's just so funny that us as gamblers were like, no, that money's saved for gambling. Although in the grand scheme of things, how much money would that freaking save us? And I'm just looking at it's actually ironic that we're bumped this up to today, Alex. I realized in looking at Gamban, it's 3 months today. So
Good for you, man.
yeah, Johnny on the spot. But it's just
Yeah.
it's and I know this number is low. I know this number is low after looking at my whatnot report, but the money saved over the course of the last 3 months is just over $10,000, and it's like that's really more money than I was taking home.
Yeah.
238 hours.
And you calculated that on your own?
Oh yeah, it was easy for me to go and calculate how much time I was spending on whatnot, or how much time I was spending sports betting. I mean, shoot, if you think about it.
Are you familiar with eVive?
Yeah.
So eVive, one of our partners, great app that you can use to track how much money you're saving from abstaining from gambling or gambling-like behaviors. And so, when you look at that number, and the amount is relative, right? Everybody's got a different threshold in terms of how much money, how much money you lost or could lose, or could screw around with. Like, everybody has a different threshold. Everybody has a different I should say tolerance when it comes to that sort of thing. So $10,000 to one person is completely different to the next person, which is a huge part of the reason why we don't necessarily talk about figures in GA type settings, right? And it's totally fine in this environment, by the way. You can
I feel guilty, and I'm not obviously not defiant.
Don't feel guilty.
I know there's people out there who would be laughing, be like, 10,000, that's nothing. But there are people like, holy cow, like what I could do with 10,000, and that's where it just feels bad. But it just goes back to the point of, you make more, you spend more, right? Anytime I get a raise, guess what? That was more money that I could be bidding on whatnot. And I'm sure that if I was in a spot where I was, making minimum wage, I'd still be maxing out as much as I could. Right? So
when you were spending on whatnot, did you reach a point where you weren't necessarily making deliberate decisions anymore? Like, you knew you didn't need something, or maybe didn't even particularly want it, but still felt compelled to participate?
It's probably 95% of the time. When I would see in those repacks, okay, floor is at 1,000 to 3,000, and then you got one card that's at 15 to 20K or whatever it may be. How do I get that top card, right? I'm in there doing the math every time. Okay, all right, I bought 3 spots. The floor is here. I could probably buy in a spot and break even, right? Well, then you get a shitty card and you can't trade anymore, and what do you do? So it was trying to get that chaser, whether it be a 3K card, 5K card, whatever the chaser was. I'd get into some small breaks where I was like, I missed so much and skunked in these bigger streams. I was like, okay, let me go into a stream that I've never been before and try to get something back, and just don't know anything about their breaks and don't have any kind of edge. We never really do, right? But so no, unfortunately, it was, dude, I was always just chasing for the big card, for the thrill, for that dopamine hit, and would get so lost in it. And I'd be like, wait, how did I spend so much money? And God, it's crazy that the credit card companies never called. Sure, there's text, hey, did you spend this? They don't care, right?
They don't flag it.
It never, like,
because they want you to spend the money.
They want you to spend it.
They want you to owe it. They actually hope that you don't make your monthly payment in full, because they know the interest is incredibly high, and that it's going to carry over, and you're going to end up owing them more money at the end of the day. I think that loss of intentionality is an important distinction, right? Two people can engage in something that looks very similar from the outside while having completely different internal experiences, right? The question becomes less about the activity itself and more about your relationship with it, right? Like, are you choosing what you're doing, or are you increasingly feeling controlled by it? And I think that's, again, it's really important to, reflect on. It's a part of taking personal inventory and setting boundaries, and, making sure you're staying within your limits, especially when you're taking our harm reduction approach of intentional collecting, which, again, works for some, might not work for others. But at the end of the day, it's a slippery slope. We all know that. And that's why guardrails and oversight and personal inventory and checking in and staying within your means and your budget, your boundaries have to be paramount, right?
Yeah.
What
I think
started?
too, one thing
Sorry,
that
go
we
ahead.
really, one thing that we really haven't dove into much is like, the depression side of it. And while sure I was getting lost in some of the spending, it really was me turning to, this was my coping skill. As I mentioned earlier, the depression and isolations, it went on for about 3 years, really that whole time that I was over in Central Oregon. Unfortunately that relationship, it moved quick. There was talks of everything that I've wanted for the last 10 years. She had a daughter who is amazing. And, when we separated, one of those things where I didn't have to get over her, I had to get over her daughter too. And that was a challenge.
Hmm.
And, bless their hearts, but like she was in a toxic relationship and she went back to him. And then there was times where she'd reach out and I thought I'd have a chance of getting back together with her, but she went back to him. And then, again, she left him, she got her own place, and we got back together and kind of having these same talks, right? Hey, I'd marry tomorrow, or hey, I'd had kids with you tomorrow. Like the things that I've been wanting to hear for so long. And I got caught in a cycle and really my own toxic relationship and didn't know it. Put up with things that I wouldn't even have dreamed of. But
Right.
my big relapses, and they became bigger after each time she came back, and that sense of hope came and then was gone. And
Yeah.
that's how I coped, was with gambling.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happens. The triggers, the urges, they could stem from relational, challenges that you're facing. I certainly have been there too. I know exactly what you're talking about. So, at the end of the day, we have to remind ourselves that we're only human, and we could try to set boundaries. We could try to make adult decisions. But, if you start seeing those warning signs, it deserves attention, right? The issue isn't necessarily always a specific dollar amount, because everyone's circumstances are different, and it affects us beyond just financially. It's emotionally, it's mentally, it's physically, it's relationally, right? And it's really whether you repeatedly establish boundaries for yourself and then find yourself unable to honor them. That's when, again, it's really, really important for us to pause, take personal inventory, reflect. You don't have to go through the full 12 steps. You don't even have to go through a comprehensive IOP or recovery program of any type. Just make sure that you're getting the help you need, that you have a network around you, a support network in some form, right? We can't heal alone and in isolation. We have to heal in community, no matter what that healing process looks like, right? It could be a minor cut. It could be like catastrophic terminal illness. Either way, we need support. How much did people around you actually know what was happening? Like, were the people closest to you seeing the full picture?
I don't think there really was anybody. You've heard me say it, and I think you've said it yourself. One of the craziest stats that I heard at recovery was out of gambling, compulsive gambling, and that addiction, alcohol addiction, and narcotic addiction. The highest suicide rate is where
gambling.
Yep. And why is that? Well, one, gambling's normalized. It's so socially acceptable. With alcohol, you can see when somebody's drunk. You can see or hear when they get a DUI, and somebody goes to jail for drugs. Like, you hear about that, but you don't hear about me putting X amount of dollars into whether it be a machine or onto a DraftKings account or whatnot purchases, right? You have no idea. And even, it's just in GA, you don't associate with people who gamble. And I'm like, I'm reading that. I'm like, how am I going to do that when I get out? I can't count on one hand friends that don't gamble in some form. Sure, they may have under control, but like all of my friends love to gamble in some facet, right?
Yep.
Even little things like harmless cornhole games, but when you're entering a tourney for $25 and there's top 3 get cash prizes, I mean, you're gambling,
Yep.
You can't control the outcome. Sure, it's a little bit different, but as they say, the first bet's the often one to avoid, right? Like it's more like the first drink to an alcoholic. So
and that's often why they call gambling addiction the hidden addiction, right? Like you said, it's not something that necessarily pours outwards. It doesn't necessarily show up in the way we look or the way we act, right? Like it could, but not the same way that drugs and alcohol do. And then to your point about the suicide rate, with gambling addiction specifically, it's the one addiction where you can quite literally destroy your entire life in a matter of minutes, right? Of course, you could do that with drugs or alcohol by overdosing or by, alcohol poisoning, whatever. But like most of the time when people drink too much, they pass out, they wake up the next day with a hangover. With drugs, same idea. With gambling, you can lose everything in a matter of minutes, and your life is fundamentally altered as a result. So, that's important to take into account, and we're not undermining any other type of addiction or comparing it by any means.
Oh God, no.
The data, the statistics show us that gambling addiction is the leading cause of suicide for all addictions. I think that's the right place to transition to our next segment, because sometimes the hardest problem to recognize is the one that can still look completely normal from the outside, right? Like you're participating in environments that plenty of other people participate in without experiencing harm. That gives you an enormous amount of room to rationalize what's happening, right? You could tell yourself you'll spend less next month, you'll take a break, you'll make better decisions, you'll get things under control. Eventually, though, the question stops being whether you're making imperfect decisions and becomes whether you're actually in control anymore. So let's talk about what happened when you reach that point. Segment 2 is called Losing Control and Making the Decision to Get Help. So when you hear the phrase loss of control, what did that actually look like in your life? Not a textbook definition. What did it look like for you day to day?
Well, I mean, it literally probably was day to day, because I feel like I was on there on Whatnot every day.
Right.
But when it came to the point of I was in the same gross cycle over and over again, and I told myself, I'm not going to do this tomorrow. I'm not going to do this next week. Like just repetitive cycle over and over. It's like, obviously, there's a definition of insanity, right? I literally, it's like, how can I not do anything different here? Why do I keep needing to turn to gambling, whether it be in any form of what it was? That had to be it. Like it's the same cycles. Like I didn't want to go out with some of my friends that are inviting me, or I'd start making excuses on why I was, going to be late. Oh, sorry, I lost track of time. Well, I knew where time was going. I mean, yeah, there's times when you like, oh crap, it's 2 hours have gone by, but it's pretty easy to know you've been gambling too long, especially when you got things you got to do. But yeah, I don't know if that answers the question or not, Alex.
No, it definitely does. I think putting in those terms is important, right? Because loss of control can sound abstract until somebody describes what it actually looks like, right? It can mean repeatedly saying you're done and then doing it again. It can mean crossing your own boundaries. It can mean hiding your behavior. It can mean thinking about the next opportunity while still dealing with the consequences of the last one.
Or going into the thing of, okay, you know what? I don't know how this happened, but my PayPal account started getting treated like a credit card. Before I was like, I only could authorize $500 transactions, and the next thing you know, months later, it's all of a sudden it's like $8,000 transactions. And what I would do, and I recognized it, is I would wait till X time on Saturday because my credit cards are maxed out. I don't have any more money in my bank account. Well, okay, PayPal deducts, but the banks aren't open on Saturday, so okay, let's use PayPal. And then Sunday, the money can't come out because they're open. And then by Monday, I've already got the wire and I've replaced that money. Or I haven't got the money. And it's just like, it got to the point where PayPal was cool with letting days go by because they knew they'd get the money eventually.
Right.
But I was just like, how are they letting me do this? And also it's like, how am I going down the same freaking rabbit hole over and over?
It's almost like a form of enabling. They almost want you to slip up so that they can eventually chase you for it. And they have their fair share of customers, not just PayPal, but Venmo, Cash App, all these financial services, the credit cards. And what they'll eventually do is they'll sell off the credit to a debt collector. And they'll write it off, right? Like it's a part of their business model to they know at the beginning of the year there's going to be a percentage of accounts that end up in that situation, and it's an easy write-off for them.
Yeah.
Was there a cycle you started recognizing where something would happen, maybe you'd feel regret afterward, promise yourself things were going to change, maybe actually change for a period of time, and then eventually find yourself back in the same place? And I know you kind of alluded to this earlier, deleting the app, re-downloading it 3 months later. But was that behavior like showing up all the time?
Yeah, it pretty much was. Anything. The only time where it was easier for me to control is when I was in a relationship, because I knew that, like, hey, I got to be husband material here, and spending money like this is not going to fly, right?
Yeah.
I got to make sure I don't go further into debt, because if this does pan out, like, who's going to want to marry me and absorb some of this debt with me,
Yeah, but quite often it becomes so easy for us to justify in our own heads, especially when we're in that moment of vulnerability, or dealing with something like stress or boredom or access or opportunity, right? Where we just, in the moment, we make a rash decision, and next thing we know, we're regretting that decision a couple hours later. That morning you wake up after going on full tilt the night before with that awful pit in your stomach. So many of us have been there. And I think sometimes, people imagine a trigger as like one dramatic event, but it can become much quieter than that, right? It could be something like access or opportunity. It can be a habit. It can be discomfort. It can be having the ability to act on an impulse immediately. And part of recovery is just learning to recognize those patterns before you're already in the middle of them. So how significant was chasing for you? And when you think about that word now, what were you actually chasing? Was it money? Was it a previous loss, excitement, escape? Or are you just simply trying to change how you felt in that moment?
What's top of mind right now is numbness, right? Is how do I forget, right? This big chase, if I hit this card, this is going to solve some of my problems, and inevitably it never would.
Right.
I hit some bigger cards, but ultimately it just gave me more money to spend.
Right.
It was numbness. Like I mentioned earlier, I turned to gambling as a coping mechanism, and it helped me numb everything that I was going through. Right.
Yeah. I think a part of it is, you know the expression, I wish I knew then what I know now. That applies so much when it comes to recovery, right? If only I had the willpower or the wherewithal or the basic understanding of what would happen. What we can't do, though, is live in the past. We can't beat ourselves up over it. We can't say things like, I wish I did this differently. Of course you feel that way. But again, if you dwell on that, it's only going to make, these next steps, the process of recovery, that much more challenging. We have to focus on the present. We have to acknowledge the fact that we can't change the past, right? Yep. We can't alter decisions that we've already made, or consequences that we're facing with now as a result of previous behaviors. When the consequences started accumulating for you, which ones affected you the most?
Oh, for me, it was letting my grandma down. That's the most important person to me in my life, and having to tell her that I went back down that hole and had to find somebody else to borrow money from to pay off these credit cards. Just like the her I know it was going to bring on her, and the disappointment, like that was the worst thing for me.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why when when I found Collectors MD, I told her, I said, hey, I found this virtual support group. That's amazing. I wish I would have found it sooner. I told some other loved ones close to me, and I said, hey, if this doesn't work, I will take the next step. I made that commitment to them, and then more importantly to myself. And I lived up to that, right? It's like, if I want people to trust my word, I have to trust my word. So I have to act on it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's definitely my grandma for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, letting down loved ones is definitely a big factor. And for me, I remember not just letting down my wife and her parents, but going to my parents for the first time in September of 2022, right before I got married, and basically telling them that I needed a bailout in order to compensate for the money I had lost so I could cover my portion, my commitment towards, our wedding. That
Yep.
was like a gut punch, right? Because I was going to my parents in a pinch, not just admitting that, at age 32 at the time, that I had a serious problem, but asking them to basically take out money from their retirement, right? Like that was just a horrible feeling. And then I remember telling my brother and my sister on the same day, independently from one another, they had both gotten home from work at different times, that I was a gambling addict and that I was, pursuing real treatment, IOP treatment. And they both reacted the exact same way. They broke down in tears, right? Because they're both younger than me. I'm the oldest of three. And their whole lives, they looked up to me, especially my brother, right? Like I'm 8.5 years older than my brother. I'm 3 years older than my sister. My brother has always looked up to me as a role model, right? He's always looked up to me as somebody that he aspires to be like, right? Like, and for me, I just felt like I disappointed him. But in hindsight, what it also showed is that at the end of the day, I'm only human, right? And we're all imperfect in different ways. And they often say the comeback is greater than the setback. And
Oh yeah.
I found my superpower, and I think many other people in recovery have done this before me. It's not like I'm the first person to ever turn pain into purpose, and it's certainly something that you're putting on full display when you're showing up to these meetings, listening to other people giving feedback, whether it be GA or CMD. That's something that we can all do, and that's step 12 of the recovery program, is paying it forward and helping other people, overcome the challenges that we faced when we were in the throes of our addiction.
Yep.
People also naturally focus on money when they hear gambling addiction or compulsive spending. Were the financial consequences actually the hardest part, or would you say like the emotional, the relational, the psychological consequences ultimately, did they ultimately become more painful?
Yeah, financially, it was tough at first. You don't like to see your credit cards max out. You don't like to see all the equity in your home gone. And then surpass that, so that even when that house is fully sold, you're still in debt. I worked so hard at a young age to get my credit cards paid off, to get my score over 800, to buy a new car, to buy a house, close my first house in 2021. Like all those things that I worked so hard to do. And at the end of them, I wasn't happy, and that's part of the reason why I moved to Central Oregon, relocated. But man, it just goes to the monetary things aren't as important. And I think I got a great reminder of that after this is all said and done. I remember being at the GA meeting and sharing how I went into whatnot, and I pulled that report of how much I had spent over that time. And I'm happy to disclose it, not again as a boast, but it's just like potentially there's going to be people who are like, holy cow, like I'm not in issues, and maybe that helps them realize, okay, like I have a lot more to be thankful for, or whatever it may be. But anyways, I pulled that report, and it's just like, I was sick to see that number. And then 2 days later at the next GA meeting, after I shared that, I was like, what's even more sick and disappointing is the fact that it's the lost time, that quality time with loved ones. As much as I hate saying it at my age, but it wasn't an investment property. And I did definitely get myself stuck with gambling, living with my grandma. But 3 years where I feel like I didn't actually interact with her here and there, sure. But even when we'd be, having a popcorn night, watching a movie, I mean, am I in tune with my surroundings? Am I in tune with the show that I'm actually watching or movie with her? Hell no. I am thinking about, when is this over so I can go and freaking get on whatnot, right? And that fucking sucks. Sorry. Because like I am living the same house as her, and I feel like I had a better relationship with her and communicated with her more when I lived 2.5 hours away, and would call her almost every day after I got off work to see how she was doing.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah.
And that freaking hurts. And, there's these things that are really tough for me to share. And I'm definitely an emotional person. And I think had I not been more open and shared these so much, I mean, you'd probably see me break down and get emotional and cry on a couple of times on this by now.
Yeah. Money is measurable, right? It's easy to focus on. You can put a number on a financial loss, and it's much harder to quantify, other things beyond the finances, like trust, like anxiety, like the amount of mental health space a behavior consumes, or what feels like knowing the people closest to you don't fully understand what's happening. How functional did you look from the outside during all of this? Like, could someone have interacted with you and had absolutely no idea how much you were struggling internally?
I don't think there was really anybody that knew. I mean, I would go to work and I'd even be talking about some bets. And then I finally started getting up like, I got to be honest about this. If I bet X amount or lost X amount, I'm going to start sharing it so that maybe, I think it was secretly me trying to ask for help and didn't know it,
Right.
But again, it's so normalized. Everybody else is doing the same thing. They love hearing about the bet you made. They love hearing if you won or not. They love boasting about theirs too. I mean, it's just a big freaking cycle that we all love to do. And it's just like, you can start relating with people that you probably would never even talk to because you're talking about sports betting, right? Or whatever it may be. And I really don't think anybody would have known. I do know, looking back at one of the questions, I did realize that I remember my aunt, who's more like a grandma to me, she had made a comment to my cousin, who's more like a sister, and she told her, Ryan seems different. Ryan seems off. So she picked up on something. And then I do also remember my best friend's mom texted me one night after, a holiday event or some party. And it's like, Ryan, are you okay? You seem a little off. And what did I say? Yeah, things are fine. They're not.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of people that actually recognized something was off. I don't think they had any clue that it was gambling, though.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an important misconception around addiction, right? Like, rock bottom doesn't always look like losing absolutely everything. Like, someone can, maintain a career. Some people can maintain relationships, responsibilities, the appearance of stability while privately struggling tremendously, right? Like, functioning and being healthy aren't necessarily the same thing. And so again, that's why they call it the secret addiction. People might not necessarily notice that, you're continuing to function. You're continuing to show up to work. You're continuing to show up, make appearances, at family functions and events and holidays. But, internally, you're really battling this chronic disease. Was there one defining moment where you knew you needed a higher level of help, or was it an accumulation where eventually there was simply too much evidence to ignore?
I don't know what it was that caused me to pick up that phone and call. Whether it was, I'm tired of having the thoughts that I'm having. I'm tired of being depressed. I want to get back to my old self, somebody that people always want to be around. I noticed, come to think about it, I guess I noticed that my friends weren't inviting me out as much. So maybe they didn't know something was up. Maybe they thought I had just changed. As we get older, we become different people. And that's okay. But I don't know what it was that honestly in this moment, maybe it'll come to me down the road, but what caused me to pick up the phone and call. But ultimately I was tired of being a piece of shit, being a degenerate,
100%. I know exactly how you feel, man.
Yeah.
That resonates with me so much because 3.5 years ago, there was a window of time for several years where I felt like a monumental piece of shit, and that, my presence on this earth was meaningless, that I didn't deserve anything. And I got so tired of feeling that way. Right?
Yeah.
And so I realized, like, I can't figure this out alone anymore. I gotta put matters into the hands of clinical professionals, people who can really help steer me in the right direction. So how difficult was it to accept that you needed real help? Like, there's a big difference between intellectually knowing treatment exists and actually deciding to step away from your normal life and enter that environment.
Yeah, when I made that call, it thankfully was not something I was going back on. It was, this is time. I am ready. I I can overcome this. So I just need help, and I will overcome this. Um, I had, the buddy I was living with at the time. He goes, You gonna back out? You just gonna not go?" And I was like, "No, I am absolutely gonna go. Like I am too far in. I've committed to myself. I've committed to my loved ones. I'm gonna do this. I'm not backing out." I had one of my really great friends who also been through recovery of his own, a different addiction, and he was great and took me up there and talking about how proud he was of me. And that phrase goes a long ways for me.
Yeah.
I don't think I heard it enough growing up. And I remember one of my coaches. Sorry, I'm getting a little choked up here.
That's all
Football
good.
coaches,
Take your time.
seeing me later in life and being like, "I'm proud of the man you've become." Man, that freaking felt good,
Yeah.
right? And so that I'm proud of you. We don't hear it enough,
Yeah.
and it helps, right? And I've heard that a lot lately, and it feels good to know that I'm on the right track.
Yeah. I love that point. There have been times in my life where I've been um, really successful with my career, right? I was in media for over 13 years and I was doing well, especially by the time I really hit my stride around the time I turned 30. And from the outside looking in, I would get those comments all the time, right? People, especially my parents, so proud of me. When I first got into breaking during the pandemic, my dad thought it was really cool. He was like, my son's he's a hustler. Like I've always been like,
Yeah.
into the sneaker reselling game, but then I was taking it to the next level with the card breaking. He was telling his friends, family members, like about this little side hustle that I had created for myself. And, you know, um, now fast forward 5, 6 years, 7 years, I'm doing what I do now. And financially, I'm not even in the same stratosphere, right? Because of all the damage I've done and, you know, the work we're trying to do today, it's not, I'm not in this for money. It's not a money making business, right? Like I've sacrificed everything to do what I do today. Yet when somebody commends me for the work I'm doing today, it feels so much more fulfilling, so much more
Oh yeah.
gratifying because of the passion, because of the pain I experienced, because I know now that my life is um it's important. Like I have a purpose, right? Like I'm paying it forward, I'm helping other people, and being able to help other people regardless of how much money you make or how much success you have, even if you could just help one other person, I promise you it'll feel exponentially better than probably most accomplishments that you've achieved in life. And that's not,
One.
again, to undermine anybody's
Yep.
careers or saying like, I'm on a high horse because I help people and, you're just selling newspaper ads. Like, no, it's not comparing. It's just, I'm telling you, walk over to your neighbor's house, help bring out the trash cans. You see, a senior citizen in the parking lot at the
Yep.
grocery store, help them with their bags. I promise you, if you're a good person, it will make you feel good inside.
Oh God, yeah, Alex, I can relate to that so much, man. I can't tell you how much in the last probably, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 months, I am trying to help my friends and family around their homes. Just like, hey, you need a hand? Let me know. You know, just I remember freaking a couple weekends back going over and helping my friend lay some bark, and then coming to the house that I'm staying at and the mowing the lawn to help around the house, right? And being like, damn man, a beer sounds really good, but I'm giving up on alcohol as well right now. So
Good for you,
uh,
man.
I think I think we talked about it with Paul. So post-acute withdrawal syndrome, after an addiction, your brain takes I forget how long it is to heal. But anyways, it needs time to heal and rewire those neural pathways.
Yeah.
And for me, when I read that any amount of alcohol or narcotic prohibits that from healing properly over that 3 to 6 month time frame, I'm like, it's not worth it for me anymore. Like, do I like to have a drink here and there? Sure, but my health and recovery is way more important than alcohol is. And so thankfully for me, it's been easy to forego that. So I'm taking a break for 6 months and 3 to go. And who knows, maybe
Yeah.
I'll be able to kick it full time.
Yeah.
But there's some times where it does sound good. Don't get me wrong.
I hear you.
But with that, I really want to, something that you kind of sparked, and for me, like, I am an open book. There is anything and everything I will share at this point. I know one of the 20 questions in one of the handbooks for the 12 steps is, has gambling affected your recovery? And 100% it has. You know what? That sucked at first, but I've realized that I don't care what people think about me back then. Like, I know the person that I've been, I'm going to get back to, and I'm going to be an even stronger and more well-equipped person out of this. Right. And so that reputation is my reputation. And I really think I'm actually going to have a better reputation at the end of this.
Yeah.
And so much so because the potential embarrassment or whatever negative thought somebody wants to think, I don't care, because that one person, like you just said, if I can help one person, it all makes it worth it. I very vividly remember being up in treatment, and we got to go to the gym 5 days a week, which is phenomenal. And one day I was sitting in the steam room, and just because I'm talking about recovery so much, I was started up conversation, and I was like, hey man, full transparency, I'm actually, I've got a gambling problem, and I'm at a recovery house for it. I'm an inpatient, and just off the tip of my tongue. And I didn't care what his reaction was going to be, because if there was the off chance that in that moment he's like, holy shit, I've been struggling with that, it would have been worth my embarrassment. Right. Or 3 months later, or whatever it may be, or for him to potentially not even reach out, but know there is a recovery house. Like, that is 100% worth it.
Yeah. I think about that all the time, right? Like, when I first started doing what I do today, it was a leap of faith. I was putting myself out there. I was talking about my deepest, darkest secrets that I was so insecure about. And not only did I share those things with, those around me, my loved ones, my friends, my family, but I put it out there for the world, right? And whoever wants to listen is free to listen. And that was really daunting for me. But to your point, I feel like I've never received so many kind words, so many compliments about the work I'm doing, fighting the good fight, helping other people, than I do today, right? Like, and that goes to show that through recovery, even if you feel like you've hit the lowest of lows, it is possible to come out the other end and feel more accomplished, more successful, not saying financially, but just more successful as a human being in society than maybe you ever have in your entire life. And again, I want to preface, I'm not saying that to say that, like, being in recovery or, being a public speaker or, a peer support advocate or anything like that is, makes me superior, makes us like, superheroes or anything like that. It's just, it's humbling. And at the same time, it's very, very gratifying. I like to kind of make light of the whole concept of a dopamine rush, right? Like, in a lot of ways, me helping other people, I'll be honest, it's a little selfish because it makes me feel really, really fucking good. Like, that's my dopamine high today. Leading these group meetings, having conversations like this, like, I genuinely enjoy the work I do today. And that's why you see me operating the way I do, right? Like, I'm just persistent. I just keep showing up because I'm driven. I care about this work. I'm passionate about the community and the, the growth of this organization, and ultimately just reaching as many people as humanly possible. Because we know how many people are out there struggling that either don't want to acknowledge that they have a problem and they're not ready to step into that, first step, or they just don't know we exist. So another thing you told me since, the beginning, when we first started chatting outside of the group meetings, that being, you become a strong advocate for inpatient treatment based on your own experience. It's Bridgeway, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bridgeway. What is residential treatment giving you that you don't think you would have gotten by simply continuing to try to recover within your normal environment, or even with just GA?
Yeah, well, man, I hope I can touch on everything here. I would say the first thing is being able to escape, not having the normal day-to-day stuff that are maybe undue pressures that we don't need during our recovery, or at least to jumpstart it. Um, Work being one of them. I don't know how I was able to still perform at work. Did they get the best me? No, but I think I still performed at a good enough level. Um, you know, I want people to know, like, it's okay to talk to your employers about them, whether you have HR or not. And maybe I got lucky, but everybody that I told, my director of sales, the VP of sales at the time, and both two of the co-founders, like, all of them answered in a sincere and genuine way. And one of them who said, well, I won't go into that, but um, yeah, I just don't want to throw him under the bus,
No,
but
I hear you.
yeah, it was very, they were all very genuine, and things that they felt like I needed to hear versus things that I just wanted to hear.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was, while those conversations were tough, I wanted to be fully transparent. And if, it was something where they said, hey, Ryan, we don't have a spot for you. Oh, well, right. Like, I was at that point, like, I know I can go out and find a different job, but they were very, very supportive and throughout that, which was a great realization for me to know. And like, okay, um, they want me back. I'm gonna have a job when I get back, so that was awesome to know. But I getting into recovery, right? It's all of the things that, like, so many exercises that we were doing, attachment styles, which sound maybe weird to some people, but like, knowing what kind of attachment style you are helps give you answers on why things in your past are affecting you now. Um, Learning about how the brain operates, man, I freaking love that. Like, it was really cool for me to understand these pathways and all the different types of uh, chemical releases that we get. Um, Things like, again, all the different coping skills, or I mentioned earlier the one exercise, and I'm blanking on it, but like, all of these signs that were my body telling me I was either stressed or I was going through a withdrawal and needed to gamble, right?
Yeah.
There was so much, God, and there's just so much of that I can't even kind of go through it all. But I didn't know about GA. Like, I knew about AA and I knew about NA, but I didn't know there was a GA. So I didn't know about GA until I got to recovery. I didn't know that while I don't love our state for a lot of reasons, one thing that they do is they do pay for recovery for gambling people, which is amazing. Now, I do feel entitled to that for the amount of money that I've given them. I mean, ultimately, again, as I mentioned earlier, we have video lottery everywhere, and the state made, I think it was $800 and some million last year. Only 1% of that goes towards recovery, but 1% still $8.6 or $8.7 million, whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that the state does pay for recovery, I think that was very cool to know, because then I didn't have the pressure of,
right,
my insurance doesn't pay for this. They pay for an alcohol addiction, or they pay for drug addiction, but they don't pay for gambling.
Yep.
So that was interesting to learn, right? But I was covered through the state.
I found this out when I was at NCPG, their annual conference in Nashville last month, that Oregon has one of the best support networks, the best funding across the entire country when it comes to gambling addiction specifically. So that's really reassuring, right?
Yep.
Every state operates in a different capacity, and they don't have the same access from state to state, but Oregon certainly is one of them that we have seen really build that infrastructure, really provide the necessary support for those that are struggling. And if you're in the state of Oregon, know that Bridgeway Recovery Services, right? I believe it is.
Yep.
Exists, and it's in Salem. And if you want to get real help, Ryan is a I'm sure more than happy to put you in touch or provide the contact information.
100%.
Fact,
Yeah.
we can drop that in the description on YouTube and the audio platforms for people who want to learn more. And we'd love to add them as part of our referral network too. So I think this is something else we talked about, is potentially getting us in touch with the leadership over there so that we can make that happen. I think everything you're talking about is just so important for people to hear, because getting more help isn't an admission that you failed at recovery. Different people just need different levels of support, right? For one person, peer support and outpatient resources may be appropriate. Somebody else may need clinical treatment or a higher level of care. The goal shouldn't be proving how little help you need. The goal should be really finding the support that gives you the best opportunity to get better.
To succeed.
So entering treatment, isn't the end of the story. In a lot of ways, that's when the deeper work starts. Once you start creating distance from the behavior, you're left with the opportunity to understand the patterns underneath it and what you were responding to, and eventually how you're going to build a life where recovery remains a sustainable, part of your life when the structure around you changes. And that's what I want to talk about next. So segment 3, what recovery actually requires. So when you first entered residential treatment, what surprised you most?
Oh boy. It was probably honestly a shock, because again, there were some people there that had other addictions, right? Didn't think that I'd be living in the same house as somebody who had, some narcotic addictions, right? But I say that, and I'm so glad that I did, because again, it's humbling. I mean, like, we are all freaking human, right? We all have our own problems, and some are worse than others. And like, mental health is a totally different light for me now. I thought I had a good idea. I like to think I'm pretty emotionally intelligent, but going through that, the mental health, like, there's just so much to it. But yeah, I'd say the hardest part was maybe just fully accepting it. I don't know. I think I was just so ready by the time I got there that, like, nothing was a challenge anymore. I mean, I almost think it was maybe too lax. We got to have our phones more than I thought we would. The food was way better than I thought it was. I don't know why. For some reason, I thought I was going to start getting like jail food, but the food was good. The company was great. The staff was amazing. So I don't know. I don't think there really was anything scary. I guess maybe another thing could have been like, what are people going to think of me afterwards? They like, Ryan was in, inpatient in rehab, like, maybe, right? But now it's least my worries. Like I said, I don't care. I don't care if you think, wow, you're so weak, you had to go into rehab because you couldn't control your gambling. Think whatever you want, dude. Yeah. I did what's best for me, and like I said, I'm gonna be stronger because of it, and I wholeheartedly know that.
Yeah, I'm proud of you, man. It's great to hear. Was there anything you assumed treatment would be like that turned out to be completely different?
Yeah, I actually had assumed in treatment that I would get a better understanding of the traumas that I've experienced in my life, or what I thought was just trauma. But that's not something that they do. It's like, I was really curious. I wanted all the answers. I had enough. I wanted to get every piece of ammo that I could.
Mm-hmm.
So while they had counseling there, the therapy side of it was something they could offer. And so I wanted to explore that. I actually I would have stayed longer. I would have stayed for probably 45 days because there was so much value in it. But I think the biggest thing is I just couldn't afford to anymore, because I had bills I had to pay. I didn't want to fall behind and go to collections on anything, and getting 10% of my take home pay from paid leave Oregon, like, that wasn't going to work. Right.
Right.
So I would have stayed longer, but I felt like I learned so much. I was committed to continuing to learn. I told myself, okay, I get out, I've got the 3 GA meetings a week, I'm going to continue outpatient therapy. And I had set up a therapist before I left. Like, I have to have all these things in place, otherwise I've got to stay. But so I set all that up, and the therapy side of it outside of Bridgeway has been phenomenal. I had tried therapy once before, and I just got the wrong person. Like, it's very important for those who don't know, like, just if you've gone through 2 or 3 sessions and it's not for you, try to maybe find a different one, because there's different styles. I really wanted somebody who was gonna ask questions and pry, versus just let me them sit back and we talk, right? Like
Right.
I talk enough.
Yeah.
So I wanted
We're
the
talkers. We're talkers.
targeted questions of, to get down into my childhood and then what I learned about, the relationship that I was in that was sent me through that depression. So
Yeah, man. I think, this is worth diving into a bit more because most people have an image of treatment without ever having experienced it, right? Sometimes that image alone can become a barrier to considering a higher level of care. You've talked about how humbling it's been to live alongside people with very different backgrounds, addictions, consequences, circumstances. What has been being around that range of people taught you?
we have a lot more than we know. Like I mentioned earlier, there's people who don't have a roof over their head. There are people that don't have any family members because they've disowned them or they've, unfortunately passed.
Right.
And like those are two things, especially the latter, to not have family as loved ones there for support. Like I can't even freaking imagine. Like, if I didn't have my friends and family, who shout out to them, they've been so supportive throughout this, and anything I need, they're there for, which is amazing. I just wish, again, like I said earlier, I wish I would have raised the flag sooner. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, just gratitude, and it's in our books, right? It's in the one day at a time. We go through that a lot, but it's a lot to be thankful for. And while in this case it's going to last longer than I'd like it to, I try to live by the 5 for 5 rule. So if it's not going to bother me in 5 years, I'm not going to let it bother me for more than 5 minutes, right?
I like that.
Well, of course, in this case, like I said, debt's going to be 5 or 6 years, but still, there's some small things where I'm just like, I've got to let that go because I have a place to go and call home, or I have a solid network of support. I have a family, and
Yeah.
there's some stories that have just hurt my hearts, and like there's probably more than I can say is, or I haven't been divorced. I mean, shoot, I remember this local GA, and it's just like this guy's in his 80s, and I've been married for 40 years or maybe longer, and he relapsed, and she left him. They're not talking. Like just seeing that hurt on his face, it hurts me,
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just like, this is why I'm here. So I do not want to get to that point. I've already gone far enough. I can't go any further.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
I don't know if that's what you're looking for. Sorry. Feel free to circle back. Yeah.
No, you're doing a great job, man. I'm really, really proud of you. It takes a lot of courage to do what you're doing today. So, uh, on behalf of everybody listening and Collectors MD, just thank you for being
Yeah,
so
of course.
vulnerable. You've also talked about gratitude and realizing how many things you previously took for granted. I think you alluded to this before, right? We talked about rock bottom, right? There are other people who have it way worse, and
Yep.
while at times it can be unfair to compare ourselves to other people, whether it be those who just have a lesser quality of life or people in third world countries, things of that nature. Rock bottom is an expression I don't necessarily like to throw around liberally because
Yeah.
it means different things to different people. And
Oh, yeah.
at the end of the day, if you can go home to a roof over your head and a home cooked meal and people that care about you, you
Wife
certainly
and
haven't hit
kids.
rock bottom, right? So
Yep.
it's important not to take those things for granted. How has your perspective changed since you've been there?
Well, I could be wrong on this, but I think rock bottom would be taking your own life. I think that's rock bottom, and maybe something just above that. But I remember driving over Central Oregon one time, kind of been back and forth, and I was having, like I said earlier, again, very beginning of the call, I had some bad thoughts, right? I totally remember thinking, man, I'd just be better off if I was dead, right? And that's not something that you ever want to say about yourself or hear one of your friends or loved ones say.
Right.
But I totally had that thought. And when you're driving and you're just like, holy shit, how did I get here? Right.
Yeah.
I was kind of in that, and I was just lost, and I was having those thoughts. And when I came to, I'm going up the pass, and I see the cement barrier, and there's graffiti on it. And I kind of, that's when my recollection comes back, and I'm like, okay, sorry. And then I read it, and I said, God loves you. I'm like, holy cow, if I didn't need that more than anything right now, as somebody who has never really been a religious person, I've always believed in a higher power of some sort. But
Yeah.
for me, it was always been a challenge to understand that God was always there and that God was the creator. I just was like, how is that possible? Like, he couldn't have always been there. And then I'm thinking about it now after this experience, and I'm like, well, something had to be the creator, right? So,
Right.
I won't get too far into religion, but somebody who was agnostic for a very long time, I'd say, that with some other coincidences that just to me aren't coincidences anymore, like it's hard for me not to believe, and I've accepted, my higher power.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a very religious person either, but at the same time, when you think about the size and scale of the universe and the things that go on, the signs we often see throughout, the course of life, it's like,
Yeah,
it's easier to believe that a higher power exists
yeah,
than that this universe just appeared here out of thin air or scientifically or biologically or
yeah,
it's hard to wrap your head around. I think perspective doesn't erase our problems, but it can change the way we carry them. And sometimes recovery focus or focusing on recovery forces us to reconsider what we value and what we were allowing to consume so much of our attention. What do you understand about addiction today that you genuinely didn't understand before entering treatment?
Whew. It's a long road, longer than I thought. I mean, you can't just snap your fingers and all of a sudden you're okay. I had a hard time and still have a hard time accepting the fact that a gambling addiction is a disease. That just, to me, I just can't wrap my head around that. But when it comes into, I guess, what I've learned about the brain, it does make more sense, but I still struggle to accept that it's a disease because I just feels, I don't know why it's so tough for me.
Yeah.
But
Well, you're certainly not alone in feeling that way.
yeah, ask the question again because I feel like I missed part of it.
So, what do you understand about addiction today that you genuinely didn't understand before entering treatment?
Yeah. Probably one of the most important things is that more people care than I realized. I thought people, friends, family didn't care about me anymore, didn't love me anymore. And yeah, I mean, some of this obviously is self-inflicted because they weren't getting the person that they once knew, because I was so consumed by gambling and not living in the moment in the environments. I was more concerned about, instead of having a great time at a party, I was more concerned about like, oh, I got to hurry up and hedge this bet because I'm going to lose my, parlay bet. Right.
Right.
So I guess really it's just like, there are a ton of people out there that care, or that if you ask for help are going to be there for you.
It's so true. I mean, that's something I think, again, we take for granted, right? There are people that are going to be there for you unconditionally, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of, whatever challenges you're facing. And I think a lot of us, we kind of sell those people short in a lot of ways, right? Because we're so caught up in our own lives. But at the end of the day, most people have at least one person out there that will go to the ends of the earth for them, right? And if you don't, or you feel like you don't, the whole purpose of a community like this one is to provide that for you, right?
Yeah.
Know that somebody like you, myself, Jared, Sean, Brandon, these are our dedicated community members that show up every single day for one another. Like, there are people out there who will look out for you and will care about your health and safety and make sure that you have access to not just professional tools, resources, peer support, but an accountability partner, somebody to keep you in check, somebody to
Yeah.
check in to make sure things are going okay, a sponsor, if you will. And I just think, I think it's an important distinction to talk about, what we knew then versus what we know now, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
stopping the behavior can be critical, but recovery can involve so much more than that. If you remove something that occupied a huge amount of your time, attention, emotional energy, you still have to figure out like what you're building in its place. So
Yeah.
you've told me you've made it a point to speak more in GA meetings rather than just simply sitting there and listening. Why was that something you wanted to work on?
Well, I needed to challenge myself in every in which way that I could. I was committed to doing what I was told was going to help me, and sharing. Everybody said is therapeutic, so I said, and I've got to try it because I've had enough. I got it. I will do anything that's supposed to help. Right. I shouldn't say anything because there's one thing on top of my mind that you know um, probably be hard for me to do, and that's a relationship with my mother. But um, yeah, it's been really, really helpful. Again, sorry, I'm trying to get back on track. Just sharing at those meetings, and it sometimes it's like I really do try to wait till the end because I'll hear something and I can relate to it so much, and it really allows me to kind of expand upon what they're saying and let them know that they're not alone with how they're feeling, that I'm going through it, or I've heard something that relates. So I don't know, kind of getting a little bit off there, but yeah, it's sharing at GA has been remarkable, and just talking about it. I think especially us as men, I will say, are not as apt to talking about our feelings compared to women. Shout out to them, and I think I've a little bit more okay with it from the start because again, I was raised by women, so I had more influence from them, and I hope I picked up the right things there. But man, I wish that us guys would not give each other so much shit when we're talking
Yeah.
about things that actually matter, and that's our mental health, right?
Yeah,
Because it's important, and
it really is. And
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say this goes back to, that a feeling of um apprehension when, you're kind of toying with the idea of getting real help, right? Like
Yep.
men feel this natural tendency to figure it out on their own, right? Where we've historically in society been providers and the one that takes care of the household and takes care of the finances, and in today's society it's just not the same dynamic that maybe it was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 100 years ago. And so it's really important. It's really important
Yep.
for men to realize that like we need to speak up when we're not feeling okay. And that's okay, right? And that's why these judgment-free, stigma-free environments exist, right? Um, and a huge part of it is like we're a product of our environments, right? Like the smartphones, the apps, the platforms, the technological advances that hook us now and make these environments as frictionless as they are, those didn't exist 20 years
Yep.
ago, 40 years ago,
Yep.
100 years ago, right? So take that into account. Realize that like, while the accountability falls on us as adults, we also are operating in a very, very challenging space, especially those people that are vulnerable or susceptible to addictive patterns or addictive behaviors. So don't beat yourself up, man. Like
Yeah.
just reach out for help.
Yep.
Know that there's a lifeline there. It exists, right? um
Yeah,
have
I mean, God, Alex, we're not alone, right? Like people need to know we are not alone. And there are like, God, like, something I didn't have any clue of, like you were asking about earlier, that I should probably share is like what the behavioral health side is covered under our insurance. If you have insurance, like there are some really great things in allowing you to see, a therapist for, in my case, my first 3 sessions were free, right? And then, I was laid off not too long back. Well, while I lose my insurance, the behavioral health side actually stays, which I think is very important, right? So I got another 3 sessions that I can take advantage of. I'm thankful that the outpatient facility here in Eugene, Emergence Odyssey, they go by several names, which is weird, but anyways, I've moved counselor to one who doubles as a therapist. So, for me, I was like, I'd love to be able to get a night back in my life and do counseling and therapy together versus therapy, counseling. So, I just there's so much resources available that like we just don't know about, and I know you know about a lot, but I'm sure that there's probably some stuff you don't even know about still,
Of
right?
course. Yeah, man.
Um,
There's
so
that's
yeah,
that's again, like you brought this up earlier, talking to your employer about what you're going through.
yep,
Again, that stigma that existed even just 10 years ago, where you go to your employer and say, I have a gambling problem, I'm seeking real help, I'm getting real treatment, I need to take some time off. You have to realize like that stigma no longer exists. I did the exact same thing back in 2023 when I entered IOP at Right Choice Recovery. I went to my employer and I said, I'm seeking real help and I might need to take some time off.
yep,
And I was so apprehensive about that conversation.
yeah,
I spoke with my wife, my parents, my therapist, like, how do I approach this? Do I even tell them? And they were beyond supportive, right? And I think it came from a genuine place at the time, but at the same time, it's like kind of HR policy to be empathetic, be supportive, be respectful of people's mental health, right?
yeah,
Because in today's day and age, mental health, it's kind of like a new age phenomenon where people are experiencing more and more bouts of depression, anxiety, stress. Again, I think stimulated by a lot of the technological advancements that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. Again, not blaming those things directly, but we're operating in a different environment than people did for hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of
so
years,
true, so
right?
true.
And think about the tiny sliver of time that we've existed with these advancements, with modern technology, right? In the grand scheme of things, it makes up 0.0001% of, mankind, the history of humanity, right? So we are not by nature optimized or wired to be sitting at home in front of these smartphones doom scrolling all day. So
Yep.
it's inherently going to have an adverse effect on us. And that's something I think people don't necessarily account for, right? So
Yep.
again, I'm just going back to the fact that society is starting to catch up and there are more tools and resources than there ever have been before because mental health is finally being prioritized in the way it should. There's something also different about saying things out loud, right? You can listen and absorb an incredible amount, but sometimes actually articulating what you're experiencing creates a different level of honesty and accountability. And again, having those environments where you can share what you're going through,
Yeah.
that can be a game changer when you're trying to pick up the pieces, when you're trying to navigate these spaces. Have you noticed a difference between attending a meeting and just actively participating in one?
Oh yeah. Yeah. People that aren't participating aren't getting the full experience of the meeting, and the full benefits of the meeting in my mind. Um, you know, the first couple meetings, is sure I sat back and tried to like understand what was going on, and they were great. But the moment I started sharing, it was like, get away from the next one. And I mean, it was so obvious to me. Is because it was like I would almost, when I was in treatment, I would almost get upset if we couldn't go to a GA meeting, like if
Right.
because somebody was sick or we didn't have the van to get us there. It's just like we got to do an in-house meeting, but I want to go and like engage with these other people outside of the home, and I want to hear those other stories, and like I want to share my progress, right? Um, yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I'm planning stuff around recovery. I cannot wait for my Monday night meeting. Can't wait for my Wednesday night meeting. I have one at 6:30 tonight. And then I have the Saturday morning one at 9:30. And then we've got a potluck on Sunday that we're doing for GA. Like, I just freaking love the shit, man.
Yeah, you become, immersed in it, and it becomes a part of your lifestyle, and
Yeah.
it gives you purpose. So I
Yeah.
can really, really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's
Trying to do my best to not transfer addictions, right? Because that's another thing that we're not supposed to
addiction
do is,
transfers. Yeah,
it's transferred to something else. But this obviously is important. So.
it's yeah, and you don't want to become overly upset. Anything in excess, it could even be something as healthy as recovery or GA meetings, or helping other people. Anything in excess could potentially become unhealthy, especially for people with addictive patterns. So I think, while at the end of the day, help as many people as you possibly can and keep showing up, go to as many meetings as you can. Don't become overly obsessive. Anything done in excess, anything that you become obsessive over could potentially lead to other unhealthy patterns. So let's talk about structure. Right now, you just graduated from this treatment center, right? Is that the terminology you guys use? Graduate?
Well, they actually they use the word transition, and in today's day and age, I had a hard time saying I transitioned. So
you got to be careful.
I definitely said
the usage of
graduated.
words. Yeah, that's the word we use. We use that, right choice. So you just graduated from this environment where there was programming, accountability, routine, people around you who understood why you're there. I'm sure you were assigned a therapist, a psychiatrist. You had the scaffolding around you to protect you ultimately from yourself. How much are you thinking about how you'll maintain the parts of that structure that have helped you when you're eventually, well, not eventually, now that you're outside of this level of care?
That was a long one. I was trying to follow through all the way, Alex. I got to be honest. Give me the Cliff Notes, a short version of that.
Yeah. So you have graduated from Bridgeway.
Yep.
You spent a lot of time there. You had the support system in place. Now that you're out of that environment where you had programming, accountability, a routine, how are you thinking about maintaining the parts of that structure that you no longer have access to?
Yeah, I think the big one maybe is going back to an exercise that I think it was a mooring lines exercise, right? So thinking about a boat that has these mooring lines that like starts drifting away. Well, the mooring lines are going to become more weak and weaker and weaker and weaker. The boat can ultimately just float off into the ocean. So keeping those mooring lines intact, or probably phrasing this wrong, but it's like there's all these things that I said I would do in ways that I would cope. Better habits, and it's just like if I start deviating away from those, well, then I know I'm probably closer to a lapse, and God forbid a relapse. So things like attending the GA meetings, working out 3 to 5 days a week, and these goals that I've set and put in place, making sure I'm walking my dog, giving her enough time and attention, and calling people that matter to me, whether that's just to call and check in, or call because I need to make amends and I owe them an apology. Thankfully, there's not a whole lot of the people left out there to do that too, because I did that while in treatment. It's just something that I wanted to get off my shoulders. But no, that structure is making sure that, like, okay, these goals that I've set up, I got to be doing these things, because if I stop doing them, then I'm likely to fall back into that same old bad habit.
Yeah. That makes complete sense. I mean, you got to find that routine. And we've seen firsthand people who have been sober in recovery for 10 years, 20 years, more. That one life event happens that's completely out of their control, and they fall back into those old patterns and they relapse. So again, it's a lifelong commitment, but you got to take it one day at a time. What are some of the non-negotiables you think you'll need to protect, your recovery moving forward?
Big one is boundaries. We kind of talked about boundaries with betting, but now that I've been out, boundaries with sure myself, but more so like my friends and family. Like, I remember getting into a group text with some of my buddies, and they're like, "Jones, you've been kind of quiet. Everything okay?" And I was like, "Well, Ryan checked himself into rehab," right? And they're like, "What?" And some of the guys didn't get it, some of them did, and I think one of them had said, oh, well, I'm still going to ask you, who you're taking on the plus 300 or whatever it may be, or, who you take on the over under, whatever it was. I forget exactly what he said, but I was like, no, that's where I'm going to draw the line,
Yeah.
And if I need to, I'm happy to remove myself from this group chat. Right.
Yeah.
But like, there are certain things that like, yeah, we'd love to talk shit to each other. Right.
Right.
There are certain things where there is a line. So it is
Yeah.
setting that line and that boundary, saying, hey,
Yeah.
no, don't ask me to what I think about this bet, or like, even a little jab of, hey, I bet you won't do this. It's like, dude, come on,
Yeah.
So
That's always a challenge, especially, we talked about men before. That's just how guys will be guys, right? Like, and people who haven't really lived through it, whether it be directly or indirectly, whether it be themselves or through a loved one. And honestly, in today's day and age, many people have experienced addiction in some way, shape, or form, whether that be a friend, a family member, somebody they know. And it's not always gambling. It could be substance. It could be sex. It could be a number of other things. But a lot of people are empathetic and understanding. There are others that just, they're gonna give you a hard time, because that's the nature of it. And we have to set those boundaries. We have to sometimes take matters into our own hands. And if that means cutting out the potential triggers, sometimes we have to make sacrifices.
Oh, yeah.
We got to do it for ourselves. We got to do it for the people we love, we care about, right?
Yep.
And that's, that's really where recovery starts becoming something you practice rather than something you simply intend to do. Intentions eventually have to become, routines, boundaries, meetings, relationships, accountability, everyday decisions. Has treatment made you more aware of the possibility of substituting one compulsive behavior for another? This is something you kind of alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
And how are you learning to recognize that risk in your own recovery?
Yeah. Well, in this case, example that was given that I haven't fallen into, and there'd probably be a benefit, as I mentioned earlier, dad bod, right? But 7 days a week, 3 hours a day at the gym's probably not actually healthy for you.
Right.
Right. So, fuck yeah, ads. The Facebook ad games, I've been sucked into those probably 4 different times now since treatment. And I'm realizing it's doing something very similar. It's like, sure, like they're more puzzle based games, and that's healthy for the brain in moderation, I'd say. But when I got a visitor over, my grandma came to visit one time, and we were hanging out, and then all of a sudden, the next thing I know, I'm lost in 15 levels of this game, and I'm like, wait, what was I just talking about with her? Like, that's just like, God, just falling back into it. So sure, I'm glad that it's a game that's not costing me any money, but it's still costing me time with somebody important to me. Right.
Yeah. And that's something we need to account for. It's not always the financial fallout or the financial loss. It's the other parts of life that are just as, if not more, important in terms of prioritizing. So
yeah. Well, and it's going back to, thinking about, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks after I got out of treatment, a week, doesn't really matter. But I was on YouTube, and then all of a sudden I saw one of Vegas Matt's ads pop up, and I was like, oh, I'm curious about that game. Right. And I was like, didn't really want to go and gamble, nor did I after it. But I'm like, I just watched that for probably 45 minutes. That gave my brain the same dopamine hit. While I wasn't gambling, it wasn't my money. I'm sitting there watching it. Did the same thing psychologically for my brain. And I was actually pretty freaking pissed at myself. Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, man. I hear you. We have to protect our recovery at all costs, no matter, no matter what the circumstances are.
Yeah. And I do want to, real quick, before I forget, like, God bless those collectors out there that have recognized the problem and they're able to get the collecting under control. I'm somebody who I've had to go with straight abstinence. Like, it's the only way for me. But like, if you're able to wholeheartedly collect with intent, right? Props to you, because that's some serious strength that I don't have. Wish I did. I'm not even going to try. It's just better for me to be abstinent. So
yeah. If I had asked you before treatment, like, what successful recovery looked like, what would have you said?
Wow, that's I don't know if I've ever thought about that one. I would have said maybe it's going to inpatient and not having to go to GA, not having to go to outpatient, not have to go to therapy, being able to go back to my normal lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Um, that would have been amazing, but that's not the case. This is a progressive illness that we'll have for the rest of our lives, or in my case, I will.
Right.
So yeah, I have to know that this is something that I could go 6 years, and people have gone 6 years or have gone longer and relapse. Like, it's not going anywhere anytime soon, unfortunately.
Right. Right. And what would you say today?
Today, oh man, I would say that, like, it's one day at a time. It's so freaking cliche. You hear it so much, but it
Yeah.
literally is one day at a time, and it is something that I wish I would have done sooner,
Yeah.
right? And I hope that more people out there just accept it. Like, hey, we've all got our own shit. We're here for help.
Yeah.
There's so much out there for you.
Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest themes of this entire conversation, right? Recovery isn't simply removing the thing that was hurting you. It's building a life where you don't need that thing to regulate how you feel. That can mean rebuilding routines, relationships, trust, perspective, accountability, eventually purpose. And that last piece, purpose is where I want to take the conversation next, because it's a big part of how you and I got to know each other. So our final segment, community, purpose, and paying it forward. Take me back to when you first discovered Collectors MD. How did you find us?
I don't think it was through social media. I think it was through internet searches, and I realized that, yeah, I like to gamble, but I realized that the hobby itself was my biggest addiction. Like, whatnot was my problem. And so I was Googling, you know, card addiction support or card addiction recovery or whatever it was. And I'm pretty sure that's how I found Collectors MD. And I found some other things that were kind of out there. I was like, no, it's not the direction I'm leaning. And then I found the site and I read through it and I was like, holy shit, yep, this is speaking to me. All
Yep.
right, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm pretty sure it was through my own efforts of just Googling what I felt like my problem was.
Yeah. It's great to hear that SEO is doing its job.
Yeah.
And Ryan, you reached out to me pretty early. I mean, this was well over a year
Yep.
ago. You had only attended a couple of meetings, but you said, you couldn't believe how much you related to what people were sharing and that you wished you had found the community sooner. At the time, we were probably only a handful of meetings in, because we
Yeah.
didn't start
Yep.
those until April of 2025. Tonight's going to be meeting number 67, which is crazy. What did you hear in those first few meetings that connected with you so quickly?
Just the likeness of stories, right? They're so alike. People going through the same thing, people falling into habits that I recognized, that I had fallen into early on. And people who just were freaking depressed, right? Just hearing their their story of why they were so down, like it checks so many boxes.
Yeah. That message, meant a lot to me when you first emailed me, because it validated one of the reasons we created those meetings. There are incredible gambling recovery communities, GA, of course, professional resources, IOP treatment available across the country. But when somebody struggles involve, newer or less traditionally recognized environments, sometimes there's an additional layer of context that can be difficult to explain. And having people who already understand that context, that language, that vocabulary, can make it easier to get to the actual conversation and connect with one another. Did it feel different being around people who already understood the environments and behaviors you were talking about, without you having to explain all of the terminology first, like card breaks or wax or?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, trying to explain to somebody, oh, I'm in breaks, fuck's a break,
Right.
that for sure. The terminology, I didn't think about that, but yeah, it's like now I have to explain like this app and its whole inner workings, right? Because as soon as I'd start trying to tell somebody, I'm like, God, this sounds freaking crazy. But
Right.
yet I'm spending my whole paychecks and then more on there, right? So yeah, I know that being able to not have to go through that explaining and just people are already knew, right? There's some big tremendous value in that.
Yeah, man. And it's validating when, you meet somebody else who totally gets it. Again, like that feeling of being in isolation and alone starts to fade when you meet other people who know exactly what the heck you're talking about. Did it feel different being around those people, who again, like already understood the environments and behaviors you were talking about
Yeah,
beforehand?
it was that kind of early taste of I'm not alone,
Yeah.
right? It gave me that little taste of that, and it's for me. Then when I found it, it was kind of a challenge to get on those because I'm over here on the West Coast in Oregon, and that's pretty much right as I'm getting off work, if I'm lucky, and generally working past that. So it's like I was able to make some, and then a combination of work and combination of just honestly feeling guilt of like, man, I can't get this under control, which is quite the opposite, right? That's what CMB is there for. Is like if I can't get this under control, that's the intent and purpose of this. But man, it just felt like I felt guilt because I just couldn't get it under control. And as I mentioned early on, wanted to help and trying to in different ways, right? But it's like, how can I help if I'm still following suit of these bad habits, right?
Right. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's definitely it's just so important. It's important for you to recognize that there are other people out there struggling with the exact same thing, even if it's the most niche hobby in the world, even if it's the most, abstract language there is. There are other people out there. It's a big enough world, a big enough space there. And we're not just talking about the trading cards, right? Like there's so many other categories and industries that exist where people are
Yeah.
falling into unhealthy patterns. Just know that all it takes is one other person for you to find that common ground,
Yeah.
for you to be able to break through.
Yeah. I think too, I think it's really important for a lot of people to know that while the hobby itself is geared towards cards, traditionally in this case, right? It's still a hobby of collecting. CMD can be applied to so many others. If your problem is, I know someone who's got a problem with buying jewelry, right? I know somebody who's got a problem with uh, purses. Yeah. So whatever you're collecting, it can relate. You just got to just take that word out and replace it with another one, right?
Yeah.
And similar to any other meeting, I remember being like, I don't want to go to an NA meeting. That's a whole long story that we won't get into now. If there's time, we can, but I don't want to go to that meeting because that's not my problem. Well, at the end of the day, it's an addiction.
Right.
It's there's so much alike that yeah, the meetings, like I could benefit from an AA, I could benefit from
Yeah.
an NA, and sure, mine is more towards GA, but like there's still benefits of those other meetings.
Yeah. That's a great point too, right? Like even if you feel like you're addicted to the most unusual, unique, hobby category, whatever you want to call it, there are still a lot of synergies between different types of recovery and different types of addiction. So don't be discouraged, if you feel like you're involved in something that is just unlike anything else, or you feel like you're the only one, that's addicted to that respective activity. There are other people out there who will understand and who will get
Yeah.
it. And that's one of the most powerful things about peer support, right? Is identification. Sometimes somebody can tell you repeatedly that they're concerned about you, and it might not necessarily fully land. Then you hear another person describe an experience that maybe is different but sounds remarkably similar to your own, and suddenly you recognize yourself in it. How important do you think it is that spaces like Collectors MD exist alongside traditional recovery resources and professional treatment rather than trying to replace them?
Oh, there's an absolute need for it because there are going to be people who can't realize what I just said, that they can't benefit from, think they can't benefit from those other meetings. So when you have something geared specifically towards this, it's going to be way more impactful for them because they don't have to go and explain what there is an addiction to somebody else because they're already in a like-minded room. I'm grateful for the fact that I can just realize an addiction as a whole. There's a lot of things that I can get out of the meetings, but without Collectors MD, like people are going to say, oh, well, this group's not meant for me because I don't have a problem drinking. I don't have a problem with drugs. Right. But specifically geared towards the hobby and collecting, it's extremely invaluable. And honestly, it's something that I really wanted to touch on is like, it's so important because I think this is going to be one of the biggest gateways into gambling addictions as a whole for our youth.
Yeah.
I am so concerned about our youth because they're being exposed to this at such an early age. You've
Right.
got the video games that have loot boxes, right? That is totally random. Sure, it's super small, but the psychology behind it is very similar, right? Or they're putting in money because they're out of credits to chase that loot box.
Right.
Sports cards are going so much more down the route of it's. I don't know. I feel like it's shifted more towards gambling than it has collecting at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about that, but
yeah. I mean, everything is about the financial come up, the ROI, the quick flip, the monetary value, right? We see it every single day with these breakers posting these monumental hits that, once in a lifetime, life-changing card. It's gotten out of hand for sure. And
yeah. I mean, I just yesterday, like, I remember being at a younger age doing scratches with my mom, right? Or my aunt would buy me a sports action is what we had before sports betting was ever legalized in Oregon. And like $1 or $5 bet, she'd go buy me a ticket for the Niners to win, right? But being at Walmart last night, and there's this family that's there at this scratch-it machine dispenser, and they're buying all these lotto tickets, which is cool that it's a family event, but what's that going to do long-term for those kids? They're going to be chasing that next day.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, she didn't even have the patience to wait until they got home to do this. This girl is trailing behind her parents, scratching it as she's walking out of the store. That's got to be an addiction already at this age for her, right? Like if you can't wait to get out the door,
that's something we're seeing more and more of is, these parents are essentially, whether it be consciously or subconsciously, using their kids as like a gateway for themselves into these behaviors, right? Saying, oh, I'm just participating in the hobby, joining breaks, doing, scratch offs, playing video games, whatever the activity is, because my kid enjoys it. When in reality, they're just using their child as an excuse or as a way to fuel the addiction. So not saying everybody's like that, but at the end of the day, like we just have to have our guard up.
For sure. And then my little cousins, when they were still in high school, I remember being over there and they've got their football buddies over there. They've got their DraftKings account up on their phone. And I'm like, how do they even have this? They're 16 and 17 years old, right? Yeah. They're only making $1 bet or $5 bet.
You see it at the card shows, man. I mean, these kids wheeling and dealing the 5-figure cards, these Zion cases filled to the brim, and all they care about is like, the trade up or like the quick deal. And like, some of them are savvy, and it's impressive that they're learning basic economics and, transacting at a young age in the art of a deal. But at the same time, there are kids out there that are going to be taken advantage of and are susceptible or vulnerable to these predators. And like the parents need to understand what their kids are getting into. And that's a huge part of the work we're doing is educating, spreading awareness to the loved ones, to the parents, to the siblings, the spouse, whoever is potentially being impacted indirectly. I also, going back to the professional treatment, in addition to peer support, that's something I always want to make abundantly clear, because peer support isn't clinical treatment. We are not therapists. I am not a certified clinician or doctor. MD does not stand for medical doctor, anything like that. Collectors MD isn't trying to replace any of that. Therapists, treatment centers, GA, or professional care. We're just trying to create another doorway, right? If somebody recognizes themselves in one of those conversations and that becomes the first step toward getting the level of support they actually need, then the bridge worked, right? That's essentially what we are as a bridge. Something else that stood out to me pretty quickly was that you weren't only asking how the community could support you, you started asking how you could eventually contribute and help other people. Where does that instinct come from?
Well, I think that instinct comes from me putting others before myself, I think that's largely in part because of what I've experienced in my childhood of, again, as I mentioned, my mom wasn't there a whole lot. And while at a younger age, I thought it was cool, but I learned that, now I am trying to always make sure that I can help somebody because I wasn't always helped when I needed it. Right.
Right.
Um, and I get a great feeling from helping others. I truly do. But before I left Bridgeway, I asked my counselor, I said, hey, can you make sure to talk to my therapist, um, and tell them some things that maybe you're concerned about or that you think that I still need to work on because I'm not done. I want to continue this. So if there's any concerns, please share those. If you don't have any, phenomenal. One of the things she shared is Ryan needs to put himself first. Right.
Yeah.
He puts others before him. And I've done that my whole entire life. And I'm not going to give that up. But what I have realized is that helping people does help me as a whole as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I am putting my recovery first, and I am setting good boundaries for myself. But um, I
Well,
just want people to feel that they're alone.
just like the expression, like you have to be able to love yourself before you can love other people. You hear that often.
Yeah.
The same thing applies in recovery. You have to help yourself, right? Because if you don't help yourself, let's say from drowning, you're not going to be able to save somebody else who's drowning because you've already drowned, right? So like we have to prioritize our own recovery. And it's ironic too, because in addiction, especially gambling addiction, we often find ourselves being wildly selfish as opposed to being selfless. And so your true colors are being selfless, looking out for other people, putting others before yourself. And so, I think that's also a huge part of recovery is finding yourself again, right?
Yeah.
Like making sure that you're going back to your roots. You're going back to the person that, the best version of yourself, really, right?
Yeah.
Do you think there was a part of you beginning to realize that some of what you've experienced could eventually become useful to somebody else?
Way earlier on than I thought I would. Again, when that gentleman at GA said he learned so much from me when I talk, I continue to hear it. That's one thing that's great about the therapy portion of a meeting is it's great for you, but you don't realize how many people you actually might be impacting as well. Just Monday night, there was one of the ladies there, and she was really having a hard time with the fact that her sister was going to come visit. And it was over something that was like pretty nominal, right? And through my share and some of the shares there, she just started breaking down and crying. It was like, thank you guys so much. You have no idea what your shares just did for me. And now I know my sister is coming to see me, not because of XYZ. Right. And she was just crying. And like that feeling, because of whatever it was that I shared, gave her that sensation. Like I can't describe the overwhelming joy that gives me. Right.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm really glad to hear that. I think one of the most meaningful things that can happen in recovery is exactly what you're talking about, right? The past doesn't change and the consequences don't necessarily disappear, but your relationship with what happened can change, and you can, help other people. Something you once struggled to talk about can eventually become the thing that helps another person feel safe enough to ask you for help, or ask for help in general. You've talked about learning from people who are further ahead of you in recovery while also learning from people who are newer. What do you think someone brand new to recovery can teach somebody else who's been doing this for years?
There's always, man, I wish we had a great example to go off of, but I feel like there's always somebody who can come in and you're just like, put in even more layman's terms than you would have ever thought of. I mean, this isn't quite where you're going, but I'm recalling back to the one NA meeting that I went to that I really wasn't looking forward to going to. And as you were kind of mentioned earlier, like just talking and being concerned about, did it sound good? And, I don't know how to speak too well in these kind of environments. I'm not a public speaker. And I remember this kid being like pouring out from his heart, no filler words, no likes. So just he flowed, and in his breaks and pauses were like great, because I mean that's, as in speaking, like it's better to pause than it is to say
Right.
it's just like to allow yourself to think. But like he shared, and I was like, holy cow, that was such a great share. And I went up to him afterwards, like, dude, props to you. I know you were worried about like how you sounded, but that was remarkable. Like you would have thought this kid was a public speaker, right?
Yeah.
But it's because when you're sharing from your heart, it just,
It
to me,
flows.
it's
Spills out.
so much easier, so much easier. And I think it
Yeah.
is easier and easier the more you talk about it.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And on the other side, what have you gotten from people who are further ahead?
Patience, right? I think the biggest thing is hearing that their problems are actually bigger than mine. They may not be financially bigger, but when we're talking about losing a wife in separation, or somebody took their own life because of gambling, like those are things that it's just like, I have to stay on this path because I don't want any of those to come up later in my life.
Right.
So it's I think you'll continue to learn from everybody. We know we all learn every day, right? Something new, but it's just, to me, it's the stories that I'm hearing of the unfortunate things that I think I learned the most from, because it's just the reminder that I need that I don't want to go down that path anymore, and I don't want that path to end up in more disastrous things.
Yeah.
Not at rock bottom. Thought I was. Realized I'm not. I realized there's more things that could come up that still wouldn't be rock bottom, right?
Yeah.
So.
No, you have a really good perspective. We're aligned on so many things, and that's common in recovery, right? Because we all learn very, very similar step work, and how to take personal inventory, and just programming in general. Yeah, but everything you're talking about is exactly why community matters, right? The person with years of recovery can show somebody with a few weeks that long-term recovery is possible, and somebody brand new can remind that person with years of experience exactly why the work still matters.
Yep.
Do you see lived experience becoming, part of your purpose going forward? Like, that doesn't have to mean a career or some huge commitment, or creating a platform like Collectors MD. It could mean advocacy, volunteering, peer support, participating in this community, or just simply being willing to answer the phone when somebody needs you.
I think all of the above. There's so much that I want to do within this. I mean, my mind was racing through all the different ideas and things that I thought I wanted to do. Some I've started on, some that I haven't yet. But advocacy being one of them. Obviously, I mentioned I'm concerned for our youth, and I'm not probably going to be an individual on my own that can help parents realize what their kids are falling into, and may are being exposed to, and it could be a problem later on. I'm not somebody that's going to be able to. Well, I don't really want to throw out a business idea. I'm sure that it's already been thought of, but things of like, how do I make it so that, yeah, sure, you can go to a casino, you can self-exclude, and yeah, you can ban yourself from whatnot, but like, how do we drill down, especially like here in Oregon, to making sure that I can't go into a bar and gamble, or a deli and gamble? Like, okay, so whether is that an app on my phone, is that something that now these casinos have to, are mandated to install at a national level? I mean, that's a big ask, right? That's a big dream, but like, that's where I'm starting to think, because it's so messed up, and I'm so concerned for us as humanity, as cliche as it may sound. Or even things like, how do I, like, somebody scans my driver's license and it's just like, oh, he can't gamble, right? We can't give him this ticket, right? If I had a way to opt into my driver's license when it scans at a deli or a bar, well, he can't gamble, then that'd be huge for me, right?
Yeah.
Sure, you have to take the step to enroll into something like that if it was available, but like, those are all things that have come into my mind. And but more importantly, it's just like, the bigger picture for me actually is smaller, and that's just one individual.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, man. So to close out this segment, when you think about the life you're trying to build after treatment, what does protecting your recovery look like for you today? And what are the boundaries you're committed to maintaining even when life starts feeling normal again?
I think the biggest thing for me is kind of what I mentioned earlier, and this is my reputation, right? It's not anybody else's vision of me, whether it be weak or some other, negative word.
Right.
This is my reputation. This is my life. It's what I make of it. I am committed to doing whatever it is that I need to make sure that this time is different, and that I am becoming the best version of myself, and challenge myself to be better each and every day. And recovery is continuing to be at the forefront of my agenda. There's just, I've been through too much. I've hurt more people than I would have liked to have, less than some others, but hurting the people important to you is not a good feeling.
Yeah.
Whether that be one or that be 10 or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, I'm committed to continue to try new things and learn from others, whether that, like you said, it be somebody who's completely green to the idea of an anonymous meeting or a collectors MD meeting, or it's people that have been in it way longer. Yeah, how I can help long term with recovery, one individual or many. Thinking about maybe some apps that are not out there that could be curated to combine the forces of, say, collectors MD and GA and suicide helplines, and just putting that all into one thing, right? So.
Yeah. We'll talk about ways that you could potentially get involved. We had already started to before you enter treatment, but we certainly would love to have you find a place here, have a stronger presence. You're already so involved, so I don't want to ask for the world, but we definitely want to make sure that we're leveraging everything that we're talking about today in terms of giving back and being selfless and helping others.
Yeah, and I if there's one person on here is like, man, right, I'd love to speak to you. All for it.
Yeah, 100%.
I have a little bit more time. I say that, and I can't believe how busy I've been without having a job. But I am trying to, again, my forefront is recovery, helping people where I can, and do a lot of job applications for sure. But one thing that I think is really important that I am super grateful for is, when I got the news that I was going to get laid off, I was thankful that I saw it coming. I got a good business acumen, so I could see sales are still down. We already laid off 17 people, or whatever number it was. But when I got the news, Alyx, I honestly didn't care. Had I not been through recovery already, that would have been totally different. I would have went back into depression or further into depression. I would have kept isolating. And I know that I either would have left that meeting and pulled up my phone to DraftKings to try to make a bet, or I would have left work and I would have gone and played video lottery somewhere. Right. Yeah. The fact that none of that crossed my mind is a huge stride for me in recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really what recovery does, man.
Yeah.
I think this is the right place to land. Recovery doesn't require us to pretend the past didn't happen. It asks us to become honest about what happened, learn from it, and decide what we're going to do differently moving forward. And sometimes over time, an experience that causes tremendous pain becomes an experience we can use to help someone else. That's not about romanticizing addiction or pretending everything happened for a reason. It's simply refusing to let the worst parts of our story be the only thing that those experiences produce. Before we wrap up, as always, I want to finish with a few quick questions about recovery and where you are today. I'm going to start our rapid fire round in 3, 2, 1. You ready?
Go for it.
Okay. One word that describes where you are in recovery today.
Happy.
Harder for you, asking for help or accepting help?
Neither now.
What's more important in your recovery right now, structure or accountability?
Accountability.
One recovery habit you refuse to compromise on?
Meetings.
One thing treatment has taught you that you didn't expect?
The gratitude.
One thing you appreciate today that you used to take for granted?
Time.
And I've got 2. Complete these sentences. Recovery became real for me when
I knew I wasn't alone.
And the life I'm working toward is
being a great partner when I find her.
Ryan, thank you again for doing this, man. There are a lot of things I could take away from this conversation, but the biggest one for me is that recovery isn't a finish line. It's something we continue choosing. And I think there's something particularly valuable about having this conversation with you now. You're not sitting here 10 years removed from everything and looking backward with, perfect clarity. You're still learning every day, just like myself. You're still putting the pieces together. You're still figuring out what works for you. And you're still preparing for what happens when you continue this transition from the structure of treatment and have to apply those lessons in everyday life. I think that's important for people to see, because recovery doesn't have to be a perfectly packaged before and after story. There are going to be good days. There's going to be difficult days. There are going to be moments when the work feels incredibly rewarding and moments where, doing the next thing probably feels pretty ordinary. That's part of rebuilding a life. I also hope somebody watching recognizes that addiction doesn't always look the way we've been taught to expect it to look. Sometimes, someone can have a career, they can have relationships, they can show up for the responsibilities, they can look completely functional from the outside and still be struggling privately. And when we talk about gambling adjacent behaviors, modern collecting environments, the same nuances matter. Not everybody participating in these environments necessarily has a problem. That's never been our message. The more important questions are about your relationship with the behavior. Can you honor the boundaries you set for yourself? Can you step away if you need to? Are you hiding what you're doing? Are you chasing a feeling? Do you feel in control of your decisions? Is the behavior negatively affecting your finances, relationships, mental health, or everyday life? Those questions tell us far more than simply asking how much somebody spends. And if your answers to those questions are making you uncomfortable, you don't have to wait for those things to get worse before talking to somebody. You don't have to lose everything. You don't have to prove your situation is as serious as somebody else's, and you don't have to perfectly understand what's happening before you're allowed to ask for help. That's part of why Collectors MD exists. We're here to create a place where people can start the conversation without judgment and connect with others who understand some of the environments they're navigating. But we're also one part of a much larger recovery system. Peer support can be incredibly powerful, but it isn't a sustainable substitute for professional treatment when professional treatment is what somebody needs. Ryan's experience is a great example of why that distinction matters. Community can play a role, meetings can play a role, professional treatment can play a role. Different people may need different combinations of support at different points in their recovery. Ryan, I've also really appreciated watching your mindset evolve from initially looking for support to already thinking about how you may eventually be able to support somebody else. At first, sometimes you're simply trying to survive what you're going through, then you start understanding it, then you start rebuilding, and eventually, if it's right for you, maybe you're able to turn around and help the person walking the same road behind you. That doesn't erase what happened. It means something constructive can still come from it. So thank you for trusting this community. Thank you for being willing to have this conversation publicly, and most importantly, for putting recovery first. For everyone watching, you can learn more about Collectors MD by visiting collectorsmd.com, where you'll find free educational tools, resources, recovery support, podcast episodes, and information about our free weekly peer support meetings. Be sure to subscribe to Collectors MD on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and all major platforms, so you never miss an episode of the Collectors Compass, Behind the Breaks, or Collectors MD features. As always, thank you to All Touch Case for sponsoring today's episode. You can visit alltouchcase.com and use code CollectorsMD for 15% off your order. If you'd like to support our mission and help expand free peer support meetings, educational programming, outreach initiatives, scholarships, advocacy, and the future research through the CMD Foundation, you can make a tax-deductible contribution using the link in the description below. And if you or someone you know is struggling with gambling or related behaviors, help is always available. Call or text 1-800-GAMBLER to connect with somebody and get the resources you might need. Ryan, thank you again for joining me today. I'm Alyx Efron. This is the Collector's Compass. And for this episode, I'll leave you with something a little different than our normal sign-off. You don't have to lose everything before you're allowed to ask for help. Recovery can begin the moment you're willing to start the conversation. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Alyx.